The man across the street was smiling at her. Not a polite smile. Not a mistaken identity smile. A patient, knowing smile, the kind that said, "I have all the time in the world, and you have none left." Evelyn Vale's coffee slipped from her fingers and exploded across the Chicago sidewalk. Rain washed it into the gutter, brown and bitter, the same color as the bruise she didn't remember getting on her wrist that morning. 3 weeks of being followed. 3 weeks of phone calls that breathed and never spoke. And now he was smiling. If you're watching this story, please tap that like button and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far Evelyn's story travels tonight. Stay with me until the very end, because what happens next will change everything. The rain didn't let up. It just kept coming, the way bad things had been coming at Evelyn for 23 days straight, each one a little worse than the last, each one a little harder to write off as coincidence. She stood frozen on the corner of Wacker and Clark, with cold coffee bleeding down her stockings, and a man she did not know watching her from across 4 lanes of traffic like he was watching a movie he'd already seen. He was tall. That was the first thing. Tall and lean in a black coat that didn't belong to a man who took the bus. And his hands were in his pockets, the way hands stayed in pockets when they were holding something they didn't want anyone to see. His hair was wet and slicked back, and his face was a face. That was the worst part. It wasn't a memorable face. It wasn't scarred or ugly or distinct in any way that would help her later when she tried to describe him to another bored cop who would write Caucasian male, average build on a form, and file it in a drawer with all the others. He smiled wider, and then he lifted one hand out of his pocket, slow, and tapped his wrist where a watch would be. Tick, tick, tick. Evelyn's lungs forgot what they were for. She turned and walked, fast, then faster. Then she was almost running in heels that were never meant for running, her tote bag banging against her hip, her breath catching in her throat in these ugly little gasps that she could not control. People moved out of her way. Someone said, "Hey, watch it," and she didn't even register it as a sentence, just sound. Just the wet slap of her shoes on concrete and the buzz in her ears that had become her constant companion these last 3 weeks. This low electric hum of fear that never quite went away, even when she slept, even when she drank, even when she sat in the police station for 2 hours waiting to file her 4th report. She made it back to the lobby of Blackwood and Row before her legs gave out. The marble floor caught her shoulder. A security guard named Hector, who knew her because she'd brought him coffee twice a week for 4 years, came around the desk with his radio half raised, and she shook her head at him, fast, before he could call anyone. "I'm okay," she said. "You're soaking wet." "I'm okay. Ms. Vale." "Hector, please." He looked at her for a long second. He had a daughter. He'd shown Evelyn pictures of her at the birthday party last spring. The daughter was 11, and her name was Marisol, and she wanted to be a vet. Hector saw something in Evelyn's face that he probably saw in his daughter's sometimes, and he just nodded, slow, and stepped back. "Elevators are open." She didn't say thank you. She wasn't capable. In the elevator, she stared at her own reflection in the brass and did not recognize the woman in the glass. Hair plastered flat against her skull. Mascara smudged into bruises under her eyes. A face that used to belong to a 31-year-old paralegal with a corner cubicle and a 401k and ambitions, and now belonged to something hunted. Something with a deadline she did not know about. Tick, tick, tick. The 42nd floor smelled like espresso and lemon polish and money. Evelyn walked past the reception desk with her head down. Carla didn't look up. Carla never looked up. Carla had been a different person 3 weeks ago, friendly, gossipy, full of stories about her son in college, and now Carla was suddenly very busy at her keyboard whenever Evelyn passed. The whole office had become that, a series of suddenly very busy people, eyes that slid off her like she was wet glass. She made it to her desk and dropped her bag and put her hands flat on the cool surface and breathed. In, out, in, out. Her wrist was throbbing. She turned it over and looked at the bruise again, the long greenish smudge that ran along the inside of her forearm in the shape of fingers. She did not remember getting it. She had woken up with it on Tuesday and stared at it for a long time in the bathroom mirror. And then she had been late to work because she could not stop staring. And then her supervisor had taken her into a glass office and explained to her, with the careful pity of someone explaining gravity to a child, that her performance issues were becoming a liability. Evelyn's computer chimed. She sat down. Her wet skirt stuck to the chair. She tapped her badge against the reader and the screen woke up, And there was a new email at the top of her inbox, sent 11 minutes ago. No subject line, sender address, a string of numbers, and a domain she did not recognize. She did not want to open it. She opened it. There was no message, just an attached photograph. The photograph was of her standing in front of her bathroom mirror, brushing her teeth. The angle was low, taken from somewhere near the floor. She was wearing the gray t-shirt she slept in. Her hair was wet from the shower. The photograph had been taken this morning. Evelyn made a sound in her throat that she did not know she could make. Small and high, an animal. She slammed the laptop shut so hard the screen cracked at the corner, and then she sat there with her hand pressed flat over the closed lid, like she could keep the image inside if she just pressed hard enough. Someone had been in her apartment. Someone had been in her bathroom. Someone had stood between her and the door while she'd been naked in the shower, and she had not heard a thing because the water had been running, and the fan had been on, and the music had been playing, and she was alone. She was always alone. She had been alone her entire life, and she had never minded it before this exact moment when she understood that alone was a luxury you only had when nobody else was watching. "Vale," the voice cut through the static in her head. She looked up. Garrett Rowe was standing at the edge of her cubicle. He was 56, and he wore $3,000 suits over a body that had been an athlete's body 20 years ago and had become something softer and meaner. He was the Rowe in Blackwood and Rowe. He had hired her 4 years ago after a 40-minute interview during which he had not smiled once, and he had told her, on her first day, that he expected loyalty above all things and that loyalty meant making him look good no matter the personal cost. He was holding a manila folder. "My office," he said. "Now." He didn't wait. He turned and walked, and she got up, and her legs were unsteady, but they worked, and she followed him down the long hallway past all the suddenly very busy people who would not look at her, past the conference rooms with their etched glass and their views of the river, past the framed photographs of partners shaking hands with senators, until they reached the corner office at the end of the floor with Garrett Rowe's name on the door in brushed steel. He closed the door behind her. The blinds were already shut. "Sit." She sat. He didn't. He walked around behind his enormous mahogany desk, and he stood there for a long moment with his back to her, looking out the window at the rain, and then he turned and dropped the manila folder on the desk between them with a wet slap. "Open it." She opened it. There was a printout. The Hargrove deposition. The one she'd spent 2 weekends on. The one she had personally proofed and emailed to the lead attorney at 5:43 on Sunday evening. The one that had gone out to federal counsel on Monday morning. There was a date stamp on the printout. The date stamp said the document had been altered at 2:17 on Sunday night. From her workstation, with her login. "This was sent to opposing counsel," Garrett said. His voice was quiet, and that was the part she should have been afraid of. Garrett Rowe did not raise his voice when he was angry. He raised it when he wanted to perform. When he was actually angry, he went very quiet and very still, and his eyes got this flat, dead quality, like a shark's, like nothing was inside them at all. 3 exhibits had been removed. 2 had been replaced with documents that contradict our client's sworn testimony. This case is dead in the water. Hargrove Industries is dead in the water. 8 years of work, $42 million in billables, dead. I didn't... From your workstation, Vale. Garrett, I swear to God, I don't. He held up one hand. She stopped talking. He sat down. He folded his hands on the desk in front of him, neatly, one over the other, like a child praying. I want to believe you, he said. I want to believe that someone has been targeting you, that this is sabotage. I want to believe it because in 28 years, I have never been more wrong about anyone than I would be about you, if it turns out you did this. You were going to be a partner here, Evelyn. You were going to be the youngest woman ever to make partner in this firm's history. We had the trajectory mapped. We had the announcement scheduled. We had a future. He paused. But there's no evidence anyone else accessed your workstation. The badge logs show only you. The keystroke audit shows only you. It pulled the surveillance from Sunday night, and there is footage of you in this office at 2:14 on Sunday morning at your desk typing. I wasn't here Sunday. You were on camera, Evelyn. I wasn't here. You were on camera. She felt the room start to tilt. She gripped the arms of the chair. She made herself breathe. She made herself look at Garrett Rowe's face, and she said slowly, "Show me the footage." He stared at her. For a long time, he did not move. And then, finally, he sighed and he turned his monitor around and he tapped at his keyboard and a video began to play. It was her. It was her, on camera, at her desk, at 2:14 on Sunday morning, wearing the gray cashmere sweater her foster mother had given her the Christmas before she died. Hair tied back. Typing. She had not been at the office on Sunday. She had been at her apartment. She had been watching a documentary about glaciers and eating cold lo mein out of the container. And she had been alone, completely and entirely alone. And there was no one in the world who could prove it. "That's not me," she whispered. "It's you." "Garrett, that is not me." He turned the monitor back. He looked tired. He looked, for one strange flickering second, almost sad. And then his face closed up and became the face of a senior partner in a $40 million firm, and he said evenly, "You have until end of business Friday to give me one piece of evidence, one that exonerates you. If you don't, I will have no choice but to terminate you for cause and report this to the bar. You will never work in this industry again. Do you understand me?" "Garrett, do you understand me?" She nodded. She could not speak. "Get out of my office." She got up. Her legs barely held her. She made it to the door and she had her hand on the knob when he said, very quietly, behind her, "Evelyn." She turned. He was looking at her with that flat, dead shark expression. "Whatever is going on with you," he said, "fix it. Or fix yourself. I don't care which." She walked out. She walked back down the long hallway past all the suddenly very busy people, and she made it to her cubicle, and she sat down and she opened her bottom drawer, and she found, sitting on top of her spare blazer, a single white envelope. Her name was written on the front in handwriting she did not recognize. She did not want to open it. She opened it. Inside was a Polaroid of her, asleep in her bed, taken from the foot of the bed, her face turned toward the camera, her mouth slightly open, one hand curled near her cheek, vulnerable, childlike, trusting. On the back, in the same handwriting, 3 words. "Soon, sweet girl." Evelyn sat very still. She did not cry. She did not scream. She did not get up and run to Hector at the security desk or call the police or do any of the things a sane person would do. She sat very still, and she looked at the photograph of herself sleeping, and she understood, with a clarity she had not had in 3 weeks, that she was going to die. Not maybe. Not might. Was. Whoever this was, whatever this was, it was not going to stop. The police had already decided she was making it up. Her boss had already decided she was sabotaging her own career. The cameras had already shown her doing things she had not done. Her own face was being used against her. Her own apartment, her own bed. She had run out of doors. She had 1 number left. She had told herself, when she'd saved it 6 months ago, that she would never call it, that she would lose his card, that she would burn it, that whatever had happened the night of the gala had been a moment, and moments ended, and people like her did not get involved with people like him. She pulled out her phone. Her hand was shaking so badly she nearly dropped it twice. She opened her contacts. She scrolled to the M's. Moretti, D. She had stared at this entry for 6 months. She had almost deleted it 40 times. She had never once tapped it. She tapped it. The phone rang exactly once before he picked up. "Evelyn." His voice was exactly as she remembered it, low, calm, like the air right before a thunderstorm broke. He said her name the way a man names something he owns. Not roughly, not arrogantly, just with the quiet certainty of someone who has been waiting for a call and is unsurprised it has finally come. She couldn't speak. "Evelyn," he said again. "Breathe." She breathed. "Where are you?" "My office," she managed. "Are you safe right now?" I don't know." There was a small sound on the other end of the line, a door closing, a pen being set down. Something quiet and deliberate that meant whatever Damian Moretti had been doing 30 seconds ago, he was not doing it anymore. "Tell me what's happening," he said. "There's a man," she said. "There's a man following me. He's been following me for 3 weeks. He's in my apartment, Damian. He was in my apartment this morning. There are pictures of me sleeping, and someone is using my name at work, and they're going to fire me, and I don't, Evelyn, I don't know what to do. Evelyn, listen to me." She closed her eyes. She listened. I want you to walk out of your office building right now. Do not take the elevator. Take the stairs. Go down to the 3rd floor and take the elevator from there to the lobby. Do not go out the front entrance. There's a service exit on the east side of the building that lets out onto Lower Walker. I want you to walk out of that exit. There will be a black car waiting for you. The driver's name is Cyrus. He will say my name first. If anyone else approaches you, anyone, you do not get in their car. Do you understand me? Yes. Say it back to me. Stairs to 3rd floor, elevator to lobby, east service exit, black car, Cyrus. He says your name first. Good girl. Something inside her chest cracked open at those 2 words. She was 31 years old, and she had not been called good girl by anyone in 23 years, and she did not have time in this moment to examine what it did to her to hear it now from him. Evelyn. Yes. Don't pack anything. Don't tell anyone. Don't bring your laptop. Leave your phone on. I will be on the line with you the entire time. Stand up now. She stood up. Her legs held her. She picked up her bag. She did not pick up her laptop. She did not look at the Polaroid still sitting on her desk. She walked slowly, casually, like a woman going to lunch, toward the door at the back of the floor that led to the stairwell. She passed Carla, who did not look up. She passed 2 associates she had trained, who suddenly became very interested in their phones. She passed the framed photograph of Garrett Rowe shaking hands with the governor. She pushed open the stairwell door. It clanged shut behind her. The stairwell was cold and gray and smelled like old paint, and the floor was concrete and her heels echoed and her breath came in short, sharp pulses she could not control. I'm in the stairs, she whispered into the phone. Good. Keep moving. She went down. 42nd floor, 41st, 40th, 39th. Her heart was pounding so loud she could hear it inside her skull. Damien, I'm here. Why are you helping me? A pause. We'll talk about that when you're safe. Damien, keep moving, Evelyn. She kept moving. 35th, 34th, 33rd. Somewhere below her, very faint, she heard another door open. She froze. Footsteps. Heavy ones. 2 flights down. Maybe 3. Coming up. Damien, she breathed. Someone's in the stairwell. How far down? I don't know. 2 floors. Maybe. Get to a floor exit, now. She turned. The nearest door was 3 steps up. She lunged for it and pulled. It was locked. She pulled again. Locked. She pulled the handle 1 floor down. Locked. The footsteps were getting louder. She could hear breathing now. A man breathing through his nose, slow and even, the breathing of someone in no hurry. They're all locked. Keep going down. 2 more floors. 31st will be unlocked. Go. She went. She didn't walk anymore. She ran. She ran in heels down a concrete stairwell with her bag flapping against her hip and her phone clutched to her ear and her breath ragged in her throat. And the footsteps below her were running too now, fast and steady and confident, gaining on her, and she could hear something else. A small metallic sound, the unmistakable click of something being unfolded, something small that opened and locked. A knife. She made the landing for the 31st floor and she threw herself at the door. And she pulled, and oh, thank God, thank God. The handle moved, the door opened, she was through it. She slammed it shut behind her, and she ran. She ran across an empty floor that was under construction, plastic sheeting hanging from the ceiling, drywall stacked against the walls, the smell of new paint and sawdust, and she ran toward the elevators at the far end of the floor, and she jammed her finger against the call button over and over and over, and the indicator above the door said the elevator was on the 8th floor and climbing. Behind her, the stairwell door opened, slow. She did not turn around. She stared at the elevator indicator. 12th floor, 15th, 18th. Damien, she whispered. I hear him, Damien said. His voice had changed. Something in it had gone perfectly, terrifyingly flat. Evelyn, he said, I want you to listen very carefully. There is a fire extinguisher on the wall to your right, 3 feet behind you. I want you to pick it up. Slowly. Do not turn around. She moved her hand. She felt for the wall. Her fingers closed around cold red metal. She lifted it. It was heavier than she expected. Behind her, the footsteps had stopped. He was standing just inside the doorway, watching her. She could feel him watching her. The hair on her neck was standing up, and her skin had gone cold and her bladder was threatening to let go, and she gripped the fire extinguisher with both hands, and she stared at the elevator indicator. 22nd floor, 25th, 28th. He's going to move in 3 seconds, Damien said. When he does, you turn and you swing. You aim for his head and you do not stop swinging. Do you understand me? Yes. Evelyn. Yes. You are going to live through this. The footsteps started again, fast, running. She turned. He was 10 feet away and closing, and he was smiling, that same patient smile. And he had a folding knife in his right hand, and his coat was open, and there was something else on his belt, a roll of duct tape. And her mind made a sound that was not a thought. It was just a long, high white scream, and she swung the fire extinguisher with everything she had. It connected with the side of his head with a sound like a melon hitting concrete. He dropped. The knife skittered across the concrete floor. She did not stop. She swung again. She swung a third time. She was screaming now. She could hear herself screaming, this animal sound coming out of her throat, and she would have kept swinging forever if the elevator hadn't dinged behind her. She turned. The doors opened. 2 men stepped out. They were both in dark suits. They were both tall. They were both extraordinarily calm in a way that men in suits are not supposed to be calm when there is a screaming woman with a fire extinguisher standing over a bleeding body. The one in front had gray at his temples. He took one look at the man on the floor. He took one look at her. He said very quietly, "Mr. Moretti sent us." Evelyn's knees finally gave out. The fire extinguisher hit the floor with a clang and she went down beside it, and the second man caught her before her head hit the concrete. And somewhere very far away she could hear Damien's voice still coming out of the phone she had dropped, saying her name, saying it over and over. "Evelyn, Evelyn, talk to me, Evelyn." And she could not answer him because she was looking at the man on the floor, at his face. His face was a face. Just a face. Average build, average height, the kind of face you would not remember. But she remembered it now. It was the face from across the street, and as the man with gray at his temples knelt down beside the body and checked the pulse and pulled back the collar of the unconscious man's coat to look at something tattooed on his neck, his expression changed. Just for a second, just barely. But Evelyn saw it. She saw the man with gray at his temples look at the tattoo on the stalker's neck and go pale. He stood up. He pulled out his own phone. He pressed a button. He said 3 words and 3 words only into the receiver. "Sir, it's family." Evelyn did not understand what that meant. She would not understand what that meant for another 6 hours, when Damien Moretti would sit her down in front of a fire in a marble room 60 miles outside the city and tell her, with his hand wrapped around hers and his voice gone soft in a way she had never heard before, that the man who had been hunting her for 3 weeks had not been hired by a jealous coworker. He had not been hired by Garrett Rowe. He had not been hired by anyone at Blackwood and Rowe. He had been hired by Damien's own cousin, and he had been hunting Evelyn for a reason that had nothing to do with her job, her promotion, or her life. He had been hunting her because of the night of the gala, because of the wine on the suit, because of the way Damien Moretti had looked at her across a crowded ballroom 6 months ago, and someone in that room had seen that look and understood exactly what it meant. But she did not know any of this yet. She only knew, in this moment, on the concrete floor of the 31st floor of a building she would never set foot in again, with 2 strangers in suits standing over her and a third man bleeding from his ear at her feet, that her phone was still in her hand and Damien was still on the line, and she lifted it to her ear with fingers that did not feel like hers, and she said the only thing she could think of to say. "He's down!" There was a long silence on the other end. Then Damien Moretti said very softly, "Good girl. Now come home to me." And somewhere in the dark, far away, a phone rang in a different room and a different man picked up, and the conversation that began on that line was the one that would, in the end, get them all killed. The black car smelled like leather and gun oil. Evelyn sat in the back with her knees pressed together and her hands flat on her thighs because if she let them go anywhere else, they would shake. And if they shook, she would have to admit that she was still shaking, and she could not admit that yet. Not in front of these men. Not in front of the silver-haired one in the passenger seat who kept watching her in the side mirror with eyes that did not blink as often as eyes were supposed to. "His name is Cyrus," Damien had said. She remembered. She remembered everything Damien had said with a clarity that did not feel like memory. It felt like carving, like every word had been cut into the inside of her skull with a small, sharp tool. The car moved through traffic the way water moves through a drain, smooth, inevitable. Cyrus did not signal lane changes. He did not stop fully at the stop signs on the side streets. The other cars seemed to know to get out of his way before he asked, the same way Evelyn had once seen a stray dog clear a sidewalk in her old neighborhood without ever lifting its head. She looked at her hands. There was blood on the cuff of her sweater. Not much. A spray. A scatter of dark red dots across the gray cashmere like someone had flicked a wet paintbrush at her. She did not remember the blood landing on her. She did not remember anything between the second swing and the elevator opening. There was a gap there, a hole in the recording, and she did not want to look into the hole because she had a feeling about what was inside it. She had hit a man in the head with a fire extinguisher. She had hit him 3 times. She might have killed him. The thought did not arrive with horror. It arrived with a quiet, alarming flatness. She felt about it the way you feel about a stranger's news on the TV. Oh, she thought, I might have killed a man. And then she thought, I hope I did. And then she thought, what is wrong with me? Ms. Vale, she looked up. Cyrus had turned slightly in his seat. He was older than she had registered in the hallway. 60, maybe. There were lines around his mouth that looked like they had been put there by laughing, a long time ago, before whatever job he did now had taken the laughing out of him. There's a blanket on the seat next to you, he said. You're going into shock. Put it on. She had not noticed the blanket. It was folded, dark wool, expensive. She unfolded it with hands that did not quite belong to her, and she draped it over her shoulders, and the warmth of it hit her chest like a slap, and her teeth started chattering all at once, hard, like she had been pulled out of a frozen lake. There's water in the door pocket. She reached for the water. She drank. Half of it went down her sweater. You're doing fine, Cyrus said. I'm not. You're alive. That's fine. She laughed. It came out as a single dry sound that scraped her throat going up. Where are we going? The house. What house? His house. Where is it? Cyrus's eyes met hers in the mirror, patient, not unkind, but there was a wall behind them that she recognized because she had been building one just like it for 31 years, and she knew the materials. Ma'am, he said, for the next little while, you don't ask where things are. You let us take you to them. Are we clear? She was not clear. She was the opposite of clear. She was a woman wrapped in a stranger's blanket in the back of a stranger's car going to a stranger's house at the order of a man she had spoken to in person exactly once in her life. But she nodded, because there was nothing else to do, and Cyrus's eyes went back to the road. The car turned onto the interstate. The city fell away. Evelyn watched the skyline shrink in the rear window. The rain had stopped sometime in the last hour, and she had not noticed. The buildings looked clean and silver in the gray light, and somewhere inside one of those buildings her cubicle was still sitting under the fluorescent lights, with the Polaroid of her sleeping body on the desk. And somewhere on the 31st floor, a stalker was either dead or in custody or in a place she did not want to think about. And somewhere on the 42nd floor, Garrett Rowe was telling someone, probably the head of HR, that Evelyn Vale had walked out of his office and never come back. And the whole carefully constructed shape of her life was already, in this exact minute, being erased. She had no laptop, no notes, no badge, no keys to anything that mattered. She thought, I should be panicking. She was not panicking. She was tired. That was the strange thing. She was so tired she could feel her eyelids dragging. The last 3 weeks of not sleeping, of jumping at every door slam, of waking up at 3 a.m. to check the locks, of pouring out drinks at bars because she was afraid of what might be in them. All of it landed on her at once, in the back of this warm-smelling car, and she leaned her head against the window, and she felt the cold glass against her temple, and she closed her eyes. And the last thing she saw before sleep took her was Cyrus's hand reaching back over the center console with a second bottle of water in case she wanted it later. She woke when the tires changed sound under her. Gravel. The crunch of it. Wheels rolling slow. She opened her eyes, and the light was different. The sun had come out somewhere in the last hour, low and gold, and they were not on a road anymore. They were on a long driveway lined with old oaks, and at the end of the driveway was a house she did not have words for. It was not a mansion, Mansion was the wrong word. Mansion sounded showy. This was something older than showy. This was stone the color of bone, weathered for 100 years, set into a hill above a wide flat lawn that ran down to a tree line and disappeared. The windows were tall and narrow, and there were too many of them to count. A pair of black iron gates had closed behind them somewhere she had not noticed, and there were two men standing on the front steps in dark coats, with their hands clasped in front of them, in the way men stand when they are not bodyguards. They are guards. And there is a difference, and she could see it. The car pulled up under a stone portico. Cyrus got out first. He came around and opened her door. "Ma'am." She did not move. She sat on the leather with the blanket around her shoulders, and she looked at the front door of the house, and she thought, very clearly, if you walk through that door, you do not walk back out the same person. She knew this. She knew it the way she had known at 12 in the foster house with the man who had locked the bedroom from the outside. That she was going to have to climb out the window, even though she had never climbed anything in her life. There were certain doors. There were certain moments. You felt them. This was one. Cyrus waited. He did not rush her. He stood beside the open car door with his hands clasped behind his back and his eyes on a point somewhere over her left shoulder, and he gave her the time she needed. She thought about Garrett Rowe. She thought about the Polaroid on her desk. She thought about the smile from across the street, and the tap on the wrist where a watch would be, and the sound the fire extinguisher had made when it hit a human skull. She got out of the car. Her legs held her, barely. She walked up the steps. The guards did not look at her. The front door opened before her hand could touch it, opened by a thin woman in a gray dress with her hair pulled back tight enough to lift her eyebrows, and the thin woman stepped aside without a word, and Evelyn walked into the house, and the door closed behind her with a sound that felt very final. The foyer was the size of her apartment, stone floor. A staircase that climbed up into shadow, the smell of wood smoke, and something else, something cleaner, like lemons. There were no family photographs. There were no decorations of any kind that suggested a person actually lived here. It was a beautiful empty room, and it made her stomach hurt. "Mr. Moretti is in the library," the thin woman said. She had a voice like ironed cotton, smooth and warm and impossible to read. "Through the doors on the left. He's been waiting for you." Evelyn nodded. She did not move. "Ma'am," the thin woman said, very gently, "you have blood on your sleeve. Would you like to change first?" "No." "There are clean clothes in no." The thin woman did not argue. She bowed her head, half an inch, and stepped back into a doorway and disappeared, and Evelyn was alone in the stone foyer with her own breathing and the very faint sound of a fire crackling somewhere off to her left. She walked. The doors to the library were tall and dark, and one of them was half open. She pushed it the rest of the way with her fingertips, and she went in. He was standing at the far end of the room with his back to her. The library was long and dark and lined with books that looked like they had actually been read. The spines cracked and uneven, and there was a fireplace burning low at the end, and Damian Moretti was standing in front of it with his sleeves rolled up to his elbows and a glass of something amber in his hand, and he was looking into the fire, and he did not turn around when she came in. He said without turning, "Sit down before you fall down." There was a leather chair to her left. She sat down in it. The blanket was still around her shoulders. He turned then. He looked older than she remembered. 6 months ago at the gala, he had looked like a man cut out of marble. Black hair, brutal cheekbones, a mouth that did not smile because smiling was for people who needed something. Tonight, he looked like a man who had not slept either. His shirt was open at the collar. There was a shadow of stubble along his jaw. His eyes, the part of him she had remembered most, gray-green and too still, were rimmed with red. He had been awake the entire time she had been awake. She knew it the way she had known about the door. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No." "Show me." "I'm not hurt." "Evelyn." "I am not hurt." He set the glass down on the mantel. He crossed the room. He did it slowly so that she could see him coming. He stopped 3 feet from her chair, and he crouched down in front of her so that his face was below hers, and he reached out, slow, and took her wrist in his hand. He turned it over. He looked at the bruise that had been there for 6 days. He looked at the blood on her cuff. "This isn't yours," he said. "No." "Did you—" "I hit him 3 times." Good. I think I wanted to keep hitting him. Good. That's not a good thing, Damien. He looked up at her. It is tonight, he said. He did not let go of her wrist. He held it gently, and his thumb moved once across the bruise, and she felt the touch in a place that had nothing to do with her wrist, and she pulled her arm back because she could not afford whatever was about to happen next. He let her go without resistance. He sat back on his heels. Talk to me, he said. I don't know where to start. Start with 3 weeks ago. So she told him. She told him about the first phone call, the one where someone had breathed for 40 seconds and hung up. About the second one. About the third. About the morning she had come out of her apartment and found a small dead bird on her welcome mat, neck broken, and how she had told herself it was a cat. About the night she had come home from work and the lights in her apartment had all been on, every one of them, when she knew she had turned them off that morning. About the police. About the first report, the second, the third. About the detective who had told her kindly that most stalking cases were ex-boyfriends, and was she really sure she didn't have an ex-boyfriend? Because she could go ahead and tell him that wouldn't be embarrassing. That was just statistics. She told him about the Hargrove deposition. She told him about the surveillance footage. She told him about the Polaroid in her drawer. She told him about the man across the street, smiling, tapping his wrist. She told him everything, and Damien did not interrupt her once, and when she was done, she felt scraped out, like someone had taken a spoon to the inside of her chest and removed something, and the room was very quiet except for the fire. Damien stood up. He walked back to the mantel. He picked up the glass. He drank. The man on the 31st floor is alive, he said. Okay. His name is Mason Kowalski. He has done 4 contract jobs that we know of in the last 7 years. He works out of Newark. He is not the kind of man you hire to scare a paralegal off a promotion. What is he the kind of man you hire to do? Damien set the glass down. He did not answer for a long moment. When he did, his voice had gone very flat. You don't hire Mason Kowalski to scare a woman. You hire him to break her. You hire him to make her hurt herself before he ever has to touch her. You hire him to take her apart so slowly that by the time anyone notices she is missing, she has already disappeared inside her own skin. Evelyn did not move. He was not hired by your boss, Evelyn. Then who? Cyrus pulled back his collar in that hallway. There was a mark on his neck, a tattoo. I saw it. You don't know what it means. Tell me. He looked at her. It means he belongs to a family, not a metaphor family. A family. The kind of family that does not lend men to outsiders. The kind that owns them. Whose family? Mine. The fire popped. A log shifted somewhere inside the grate, and a single bright spark jumped out onto the stone, glowed for a second, and went black. Evelyn felt the room get small. Yours, she said. My cousin's, technically. Your cousin. Lucien. Why? That, he said, is what I have been trying to answer for the last 2 hours. She stood up. The blanket fell off her shoulders. She did not notice it land. You're telling me, she said very quietly, that the man who has been hunting me for 3 weeks works for your family. Yes. That whoever sent him is connected to you. Yes. That the reason this is happening is because of you. He did not answer. He did not have to. She walked slowly around the chair. She walked to the window. She looked out at the dark lawn, the dark trees, the gates somewhere down at the bottom of the drive that had closed behind her car and now stood between her and the road back to the city and the apartment and the cubicle and the entire pretend life she had been living up to 10 o'clock this morning. I should have let the police handle it, she said. The police were not going to handle it. I should have run. Where? Anywhere, Damien. Anywhere but here. You would have been dead by Saturday. You don't know that. I do. You don't get to know that. She turned. She was not crying. She was past crying. She was somewhere on the other side of crying where the air was very thin and you could hear your own heartbeat in your ears. 6 months ago, she said. The gala. Yes. I spilled a glass of wine on you. Yes. I apologized. You said it was fine. We talked for 11 minutes by the bar. You asked me what I did. I told you. You told me a story about your grandmother. I laughed. You gave me your card. I went home in a cab. I never called. That's what happened. That's all that happened, Damien. I know. Then why? He set the glass down a second time. He came toward her. He stopped close enough that she could smell the smoke on his shirt and the very faint scent of his skin underneath it, and his eyes were so tired and so steady and so unwilling to lie that for a second she almost could not look at him. Because, he said, after you left, I told a man at the bar to find out everything about you. Where you lived, where you worked, where you grew up, what you were afraid of, whether you had anyone. That is insane. Yes. That is the behavior of a deeply unwell person. Yes. Damien, I never made contact, Evelyn. I never approached you. I never sent flowers. I never had you followed in a way that would have made you feel watched. I read about you, that's all. I read your file the way some men read scripture. I knew what coffee you ordered before 9 in the morning and what kind you switched to after lunch. I knew about your foster mother. I knew about the scar on your wrist. I knew you had a watercolor class on Thursdays at the community center for 6 weeks last spring and that you stopped going because you said you weren't good enough. I knew everything, and I did nothing with it. Because the second I met you, I understood that if I came any closer than that, I would not be able to let you go again. And you had built a life that did not have room in it for a man like me. She stared at him. She could not move. I am not a romantic, he said quietly. I have not been romantic about anything in my life. I have been efficient. I have been ruthless. I have been the man my father raised me to be. But I read that file every week for 6 months, Evelyn, the way a man checks a window to make sure the lock still works. And I told myself I was protecting you from a distance. And what I was actually doing was building a list of every way someone could hurt you. Because someone in my family saw me look at you across that ballroom, and they kept that information. And now, stop. Someone has spent 3 weeks taking apart your life piece by piece using that exact list. And I have to live with the fact that, Damien, stop. He stopped. She stepped back. She put her hand against the cold glass of the window because she needed to feel something that was not him, was not this room, was not the inside of her own head. You watched me, she said, for 6 months. You watched me, you knew about my mother, you knew about the scar, you knew what I drank and where I painted, and you never said a single word to me, and you let me walk around for 6 months thinking I was alone in a city of 3 million people, and now you're standing there telling me that you did it for love? I didn't say love. You implied love. Don't imply love at me, Damien Moretti. You don't get to do that. You don't get to drop that on me in the same hour you tell me your family is the one trying to kill me. You're right. I know I'm right. You're right, and I'm sorry. She laughed. It was an awful sound. You're sorry. Yes. You watched me brush my teeth for 6 months, and now you're sorry. I never watched you, Evelyn. I had a man pull a file once a month. I read paper. I never had a camera in your apartment. I never had a man in your hallway. I have never in 6 months been within 100 feet of you. I swear that to you on... He stopped. He did not say what he was going to swear it on. He swallowed. His jaw moved. I swear it to you on the only thing I have left that's worth anything, he said, which is sitting in this room with me and looking at me like I'm the worst thing that ever happened to her. Maybe you are. Maybe. She held his eyes. He held hers. The fire crackled. Somewhere outside, very far away, a dog barked once and stopped. I want to leave, she said. You can't. That's not your call. It's not a call, Evelyn. It's a fact. There are men outside the gates. I don't know whose. There were 2 cars on the road behind us between mile marker 42 and the turnoff. Cyrus burned them off in the construction zone, but they know roughly where we are. If you walk out of this house tonight, you will be in the trunk of a car before morning. You don't know that. I know exactly that because I have put women in trunks of cars before. The room went still. She stared at him. He did not look away. You wanted the truth, he said. That's the truth. I am not a good man. I have not been a good man for a long time. I have done things you do not have words for yet. I have given orders I cannot take back. And the only reason I'm standing here telling you any of this is because if I lie to you tonight, if I make myself into a softer thing than I am because it's easier for you to look at, you will trust me. And tomorrow or the day after, when you find out the truth on your own, you will run and you will die, Evelyn. You will die. And I am not... I am not willing to let that happen because I was too much of a coward to be honest with you in this room tonight. She felt something very strange. She felt the floor settle under her, like a building settling onto its foundation after an earthquake. She thought, this is the worst thing anyone has ever said to me, and it is also the first true thing anyone has said to me in years. She did not know what to do with that. She walked back to the chair. She sat down. She put her face in her hands. For a long time, she did not speak. He did not speak either. He stood there, and he let her have the silence, and she could feel him standing there the way you feel a storm sitting offshore. And after a while, she lifted her head, and she looked at him through her fingers, and she said, "Why now?" "What?" "Why now, Damien? If your cousin saw you look at me 6 months ago, why does he wait 6 months to send a man to take me apart? What changed?" He went still. It was not the stillness from before. The from before stillness was the stillness of a man choosing his next move. This was a different stillness. This was the stillness of a man who has just realized he has missed something. "That's a good question," he said slowly. "It's the only question." He turned. He walked to the desk in the corner. He picked up a phone she had not noticed, a small black handset with no buttons on it, and he pressed it once against his ear. He said, "Get me Lucien's calendar for the last 6 weeks. Everything, public and private. I want to know who he's met with, where, and for how long. And I want to know what changed in his life 8 days ago, because something did." He set the phone down. He looked at Evelyn. "You may have just earned your life back," he said. "Don't." "What?" "Don't be charming, Damien. Not tonight. I cannot take it tonight." He nodded. He didn't say anything else. The thin woman in the gray dress appeared in the doorway with a tray. There was a bowl of soup on it, and a piece of bread, and a glass of red wine, and a small white pill in a paper cup. The thin woman set the tray down on the table beside Evelyn's chair without making a sound. "The pill is for sleep," she said. "I don't want it." "You haven't slept in 19 days, ma'am." She stopped. She had not told anyone that. She had not told Damien that. She had barely told herself that because if she said it out loud, it would make her sound like the kind of woman who needed pills, and she had spent her entire adult life being the kind of woman who did not need anything from anyone. "How do you know that?" she said. The thin woman did not answer. She just glanced very briefly at Damien, and then she left the room and closed the door behind her. Evelyn looked at Damien. Damien did not look away. "You said you didn't have me followed," she whispered. "I didn't." "Then how—" "There is a difference," he said, "between being followed and being watched over. I have not had a single man within 100 feet of you in 6 months, but I've had eyes on the building you live in and on the building you work in, and on every car that has come down the street outside your apartment between the hours of midnight and 5 in the morning. The eyes never came inside. The eyes never even came close. But they were there. And tonight, when I asked Cyrus how many nights you have slept in the last 3 weeks, he told me, because he knew. The room tilted. Evelyn put her hand on the arm of the chair to keep herself in it. "You said you were a coward 6 months ago," she said. "I was." "And what are you now?" He looked at her. For the first time all night, his face did something that wasn't tired and wasn't ruthless and wasn't careful. It cracked. Just a little. Just at one corner of his mouth. Just enough for her to see what was underneath it, which was a man who was about to lose something he had not even let himself name yet, and who knew it, and who was choosing, in this exact moment, to lose it honestly instead of keeping it through a lie. "Tonight," he said, "I am whatever you need me to be." She closed her eyes. She thought, no. This is not how this happens. This is not how women in stories like this get out. This is how they get in. She opened her eyes. She picked up the small white pill. She put it on her tongue. She drank the wine. Across the room, the fire popped, and the thin spark jumped out a second time, and this time, before it could die, the small black phone on the desk rang. Damien picked it up. He listened. His face changed in a way Evelyn had never seen a face change before. It did not get angry. It did not get afraid. It got empty. In a slow, careful way, like someone draining water out of a glass one drop at a time so that nothing spilled. He set the phone down. He stood very still for a long moment. Then he walked across the room and crouched in front of Evelyn's chair again, and he took her hand in both of his, and his hands were warm and dry and steady, and he looked her in the eye. "Evelyn, What? That call was from a friend of mine in the Cook County Coroner's office. Okay. Mason Kowalski died 40 minutes ago. She did not move. She could not feel her face. From the fire extinguisher, she whispered. No. She stared at him. From a fentanyl injection, Damien said, administered by a man in scrubs who walked into the holding cell where they were keeping him for transport. The man in scrubs is not on any hospital roster. The man in scrubs walked out the south entrance and got into a black SUV with no plates. There is no footage of the man in scrubs because the camera in that hallway was disabled 20 minutes before he arrived. Mason Kowalski was killed, Evelyn, by the same people who sent him after you, the moment they realized he had failed. Why? Because dead men don't take plea deals. Dead men don't name the cousin who hired them. She felt the small white pills starting to work somewhere at the edges of her brain. The room was getting softer. The fire was getting farther away. Damien's hands around hers were the only solid thing in the world. There is something else, he said quietly. What? The man in scrubs who walked into that holding cell. Yes. I know him. She tried to focus. She tried to keep her eyes open. How? She whispered. Damien's jaw moved. He used to work for me. The fire popped a third time, and somewhere very far away, on the other side of the long lawn and the iron gates and the dark trees, the first headlights of the night turned off the main road and began, slow and patient, to climb the driveway toward the house. The headlights climbed the driveway slow. Cyrus had a phone against his ear before they reached the second curve. Evelyn could hear him in the hall, voice low, voice flat, voice making the kind of arrangements that did not get made in front of women in expensive houses. The small white pills sat on her tongue like a coin she could not swallow. She fished it out with 2 fingers and set it on the saucer beside the wine, and Damien did not stop her. He saw her do it. He nodded once. How many cars? He said into the dark of the doorway. 1, Cyrus answered from somewhere out of sight. 1 car, 1 driver, windows down, both hands on the wheel where the cameras can see them. Alone. Alone, sir. Plates. Plates are clean. Rental. Picked up at O'Hare 940 this morning under the name Margaret Hollis. Margaret Hollis died in 2014. Damien did not move. Evelyn watched his face. She was learning his face the way you learn a road in the dark, by the bumps and the turns. There was a place along his jaw, just under the ear, where a muscle ticked when he was choosing whether to kill someone. It was ticking now. Let the car come up, he said. Stop it at the portico. Do not open the door. I want to see who gets out before they see me. Cyrus nodded and was gone. Damien turned back to her. He had not let go of her hand the whole time. He looked down at it, like he was surprised to find it still in his, and he set it very gently back in her lap. The skin of her palm felt cold where his had been a second before. Go upstairs, he said. No. Evelyn? No. You don't know what's about to walk through that door. That's exactly why I'm not going upstairs. She had not planned the sentence. It came out of her like a cough. She heard herself say it, and she heard herself mean it, and she understood, with a low, slow horror, that something in her had changed in the back of that car on the interstate. Or maybe earlier, maybe in the stairwell, maybe at the moment her hands had closed around red metal. The Evelyn from this morning would have gone upstairs. The Evelyn from this morning would have done what she was told. This new person, the one wearing her body, the one with another woman's blood on her cuff, was not going upstairs for anyone. Damien looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, just once. Stand behind the desk, he said. Don't speak. Don't move unless I move first. If I tell you to leave the room, you leave the room. That is the only thing I will ask of you. Do you understand? Yes. Say it back. Behind the desk. Don't speak. Don't move. If you tell me to go, I go. Good girl. He turned. He walked to the fire. He picked up the poker from the iron stand and he turned it over in his hand once, considering the weight of it, the way another man might consider a pen before signing a check, and then he set it back. He took something out of the drawer in the side table instead, something small and black and not a pen. He slid it into the waist of his trousers at the small of his back, and his jacket came down over it, and you could not see it unless you knew it was there. He looked for a moment exactly like what he had told her he was. The doorbell did not ring. There was no doorbell. A footman opened the door and a woman walked in. Evelyn heard her before she saw her. Heels on the stone of the foyer, sharp, unhurried, the heels of a woman who had been in this house before and was not impressed by it. There was a small silence. Then the doors to the library opened, both of them this time, and the woman stepped inside. She was 40, maybe 45. Black hair cut short and severe along her jaw, the kind of cut that cost $600 and was meant to look like it cost $20. A camel coat that hung off her shoulders like she had walked out of an editorial. She carried no purse. She carried a single manila envelope, the same kind Garrett Rowe had dropped on his desk this morning, and she carried it the way some people carried a gun. Her eyes found Damien first. Then they found Evelyn. They lingered on Evelyn for one full second. And then they came back to Damien, and the woman in the camel coat smiled, slow and tired, like she had not wanted to make this trip, but here she was. "Hello, baby cousin," she said. Damien did not move. "Sloan, it's been a while." "Not long enough. That's what I always loved about you. You don't pretend." She took 2 steps into the room. She did not ask permission. She walked over to the leather chair Evelyn had been sitting in 3 minutes ago, and she ran one finger along the back of it, slow, and she looked at the blanket on the floor, and she looked at the bowl of soup gone cold on the tray, and her mouth did a small private thing that was not quite a smile and not quite anything else. "You let her into the library," Sloan said. "I'm impressed." "You're not here for impressions." "No," Sloan said. "I'm here because in about 90 minutes, 4 black SUVs are going to come down that driveway, and the men inside them are going to be the men who answer to my husband, and my husband is no longer answering to you, Damien. He's answering to your brother." Evelyn felt the floor do something subtle under her shoes. Damien's face did not move. "I don't have a brother," he said evenly. "You do," Sloan said. She set the envelope down on the chair. "You just never met him." The library went quiet in a way Evelyn had not heard a room go quiet before. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. Sloan walked, slow, around the chair. She did not look at Evelyn again. She did not need to. She had taken Evelyn in once and put her in a drawer marked later, and Evelyn could feel the drawer closing. "Your father had a son in 1989, Sloan said, in Palermo, with a woman he was not married to and never acknowledged. He paid for her silence until she died in 2003. The boy grew up in a village outside the city. He was raised by a man who told him his father had been a soldier killed in Lebanon. He learned the truth at 19, the way most of us learn the truth, from a stranger at a funeral. Your father met him once, in 2011, and gave him $40,000 and told him to never come to America. And your father is dead, Damien, so the leash is off. Show me proof. It's in the envelope." "Show me proof I can read on your face." Sloane's chin lifted half an inch. "His name is Matteo. He is 36. He has been living in Toronto for the last 4 years. He has been meeting with Lucian every Thursday at a steakhouse on Bay Street for the last 8 months. He hired Mason Kowalski. He hired the man in scrubs. He hired the cameras in her apartment, Damien, not Lucian. Lucian is a child playing with matches. Matteo is the fire." "Why? Why is he doing this to her? Or why now?" "Both." Sloan walked to the mantel. She picked up Damien's glass. She drank from it without asking. She set it back down with a small clink that was the only loud sound in the room. "Because 8 years ago," Sloan said, "you killed a man in Newark who had a brother. The brother spent 6 years working his way into Toronto, into the right rooms, into the right ears. The brother is now your half-brother's right hand. The brother told Matteo about you the way you tell a child a fairy tale, and Matteo grew up on it. And Matteo is not coming for your money, Damien. He's not coming for your territory. He's coming for the only thing in your life you have ever let yourself want, because that is the only thing you can lose that will actually break you. And he saw you look at her at the gala 6 months ago, through a man on his payroll, a waiter, I believe." Evelyn made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound a person makes when they realize the entire shape of the last 6 months has been a hand on the back of their neck, gently steering them. Damien did not turn to look at her. He did not need to. She could feel him hearing her. She could feel the muscle under his ear tick once and then again, faster, and she could feel the room get smaller around all 3 of them. "Why are you telling me this?" he said to Sloan. Because in 90 minutes, Sloane said, I'm going to be a widow, whether your half-brother's people come up that driveway or not. My husband signed his death certificate the day he stopped answering your phone calls and started answering Mateo's. He just doesn't know it yet. And I am not interested in being a widow without a future. So I am here, Damien, to make a trade. What trade? The envelope, Sloane said, has every name, every account, every meeting, every photograph, 8 months of work. I built it myself alone because I do not trust the men in my own house any more than you do. I will give you the envelope. You will use what's in it. You will move tonight, before sunrise, and you will dismantle Mateo before he finishes dismantling you. And in return, she paused. She looked at Evelyn for the first time since she had walked in. In return, she said, I want the girl. The library stopped. Damien did not speak. Evelyn could not. Excuse me, Damien said very softly. You heard me. Say it again. I want the girl, Damien. I want her gone. I want her on a plane tonight to a city I name with a passport I provide and a life I have already built for her. And I want her gone from your life forever. Because the moment she stays, the moment Mateo confirms what he already suspects, which is that this woman is the soft place in you, every man on the East Coast with a grudge against your father will come for her. And I am not interested in watching this family die over a paralegal. No, Damien said. It was the quietest word Evelyn had ever heard. It is not a no, Damien. It is a no. You don't get a no, not tonight. I will burn the envelope in front of you. Then she dies tonight, and you die by Sunday, and I have wasted my last move. Sloane, listen to me. Sloane took one step forward. Her voice did not rise. It dropped. I have not slept in 4 days. I have eaten 3 meals in a week. I have done this for you, you stupid boy. I have done this because I held you when you were 6 and your mother had locked herself in the bathroom for the 3rd night in a row. And I have done this because I am the only person left in this family who remembers what you were before your father got to you. I am giving you a way out. This is the way out. You do not get a softer one. Damien did not look at her. He looked at Evelyn. He had not looked at Evelyn the whole time Sloane had been talking, and now he did, and his face was a country Evelyn had never been to and did not know how to read. His eyes were not begging. His eyes were not asking. His eyes were doing something worse, which was waiting. Waiting to see what she was. Waiting to see what she would choose. Waiting to see, in this exact moment, whether the woman he had read about for 6 months was the woman she actually was. She felt the desk against the back of her thighs. She felt the cold air from the window at her shoulder. She felt every part of her old life, the cubicle, the promotion, the watercolor class at the community center, the small dead bird on her welcome mat, the Polaroid in the drawer, slide off her like a coat. She stepped forward. She came around the desk. She walked to where Sloane was standing, and she stopped 2 feet from her, and Sloane's eyebrows did not move, but her eyes did, a flicker, just for 1 second, of a woman recalculating. Margaret Hollis, Evelyn said. Sloane went very still. That's the name on your rental, Evelyn said. Margaret Hollis died in 2014. You used to use that name when you'd come visit a woman who lived on West 81st Street in the early 2000s. There's a Margaret Hollis on the lease at that address from 2001 to 2009. The woman who actually lived there was named Teresa. Teresa kept a diary. The diary is in evidence in a federal case Blackwood and Rowe handled in 2019. I read it. I read all of it. I read it because I was 26 years old and I wanted to be a paralegal who didn't miss anything. Sloane's mouth moved very slightly. I know who Teresa was to your husband, Evelyn said. I know what was in the boxes she kept under her bed. I know what's on page 41 of her diary because I am the person who flagged it for the senior partner, and the senior partner is the reason it never made it into discovery. And the reason it never made it into discovery is sitting in a safe in this house right now, and I am willing to bet you anything in the world that you don't know it exists. Sloane did not move. She did not breathe. You came here to trade an envelope for me, Evelyn said. I am telling you, Sloane, that I am the wrong person to trade for, because the diary your husband thinks is in evidence is not in evidence. It is upstairs. And if Damien gives you to me instead of the other way around, I can promise you that by sunrise your husband will be the one in the trunk of a car, and you will be the one with the future. The room held. Sloane stared at her. Damien stared at her. Evelyn did not look at Damien. She did not dare. She kept her eyes on Sloane, and she kept her face still and her hands at her sides. And somewhere very far away, behind her sternum, the last small piece of the woman she had been at 9 o'clock this morning quietly died. Sloane spoke first. "You're lying," she said. "Maybe. You don't know about the diary. Page 41, second paragraph, third sentence. It starts with the words, 'He came back from Newark with a different watch on.'" Sloane's face did something Evelyn had never seen a face do. It did nothing. It did absolutely nothing, which was how Evelyn knew she had hit. Damien was looking at her now. She could feel it on the side of her face the way you feel the sun. She did not turn. "Damien," Sloane said. Her voice was different now, smaller, tighter. "Damien, what is this?" "I don't know, Sloane." "Is that true? About the diary?" "I don't know yet." "You don't know?" "I have a safe in this house with 11 things in it that I have not personally inventoried in the last 4 years. If she says it's in there, I believe her enough to check, which is more than you came in here with." Sloane's jaw shifted. She looked at Evelyn for a long time. She picked up the envelope off the chair. She held it in her hand for a moment, weighing it, weighing herself, weighing every move she had made in the last 8 months, and Evelyn watched the woman in the camel coat understand that she had walked into a room expecting one negotiation and was now standing in another, and the new one had different rules. "You're not a paralegal," Sloane said quietly. "I am exactly a paralegal." "No, sweetheart. Paralegals don't bluff like that." "I'm not bluffing." "That's the part I'm afraid of." Sloane set the envelope back down on the chair. She stepped back from it. "It's yours," she said to Damien. "Take it. Use it. I'm leaving this house in the next 4 minutes, and I am not coming back. And if your half-brother's men come up that driveway anyway, I had nothing to do with it, and you and I never had this conversation. And the girl I just met was never in this room. Are we understood?" "We are." "And the diary?" Damien did not answer. Sloane looked at him. Then she looked at Evelyn one more time. "If she's telling the truth," she said, "you have a problem you don't know about yet. If she's lying, you have a bigger one. Either way, baby cousin, you should have left her in the city." She turned. She walked out. Her heels clicked across the stone of the foyer, and the front door opened and closed, and a car door opened and closed, and the engine started, and the tires rolled back down the gravel, and she was gone. The library was silent for the length of a long breath. Then Damien turned, slow, and he looked at Evelyn, and Evelyn finally let herself look back. "Was any of that true?" he said. "No. None of it. None of it." "You made up a page number." "I made up a page number." "You made up a diary." "I made up the part about it being in your safe. The diary is real. It was in evidence in 2019. I did read it. I did flag a page. It was page 63, not 41. And there was nothing on page 63 about Sloane's husband, because Sloane's husband isn't in the diary at all, because I have never read a diary belonging to anyone named Teresa, because I made Teresa up about 90 seconds ago." Damien stared at her. He stared at her for a very long time. Then he laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of a man who has just watched something he did not believe could happen. It was a short, hard sound that came out of him like he had been holding it down for 20 years. "Evelyn," he said. "Yes." "You just lied to Sloane Moretti." "I know." In her face. "I know." Sloane Moretti has not been lied to successfully by anyone in 26 years. "I had a notes app open in my head." He laughed again. It was a little softer this time. Then his face went still. "Evelyn." "Yes." "Sloane is going to figure out you lied within the hour." The air left her chest. "She walked out of here believing you," he said, "which means she walked out of here afraid of you. And Sloane Moretti afraid of a thing is a very specific kind of dangerous thing, because Sloane Moretti does not stay afraid. She goes home, and she sits in a chair, and she takes the fear apart in pieces until she figures out what it was, and what it was, in this case, is a paralegal with no information bluffing the wife of a capo on her own husband's diary. "Damien, she will be back." "How long?" "An hour, maybe 2. Long enough to make a phone call to a man in a basement in Queens who actually has read every diary and evidence in 2019, because that is the kind of man Sloane keeps." He will tell her there was no Teresa, no Margaret Hollis on West 81st, no page 41. And then Sloane will understand exactly what you did, and exactly what it means that you were able to do it, and she will not come back here to negotiate, Evelyn. She will come back here to remove you. The fire popped. The spark jumped onto the stone. It did not go out. Evelyn watched it glow on the warm stone of the hearth, small and orange and stubborn, and she felt something in her own chest light to match it, slow and steady, and not afraid anymore. And she understood, with a clarity she had not had in any moment of her adult life so far, that the woman who had walked into this library 40 minutes ago was not going to walk out of it. She turned to Damien. She kept her voice flat. "Then I need everything in that envelope," she said. "And I need it on the desk in front of me in the next 10 minutes, and I need every name on every page cross-referenced with every active case file Blackwood and Rowe has open against the Moretti family, because I am the only person in this house who has seen both sets of paper, and I am the only person in this house who can build you something Sloane cannot take apart in an hour." Damien did not speak. He walked, slow, to the chair. He picked up the envelope. He walked it to the desk. He set it down in front of her. He did not let go of it for a moment. His fingers stayed on the corner. His eyes found hers. "You understand," he said very quietly, "that if you open this envelope, you are not a paralegal anymore." "I know." "You understand that you do not get to go back." "I know." "You understand that whatever you build out of what's in this envelope, you build with my hands and my men and my name, and you will not be able to wash that off." "I know." "Evelyn." "I know, Damien." He let go of the envelope. She opened it. Inside were photographs and ledgers and a thin black notebook with a leather cover that was cracked and stained and a single sheet of paper on top with 11 names written on it in a small, precise hand. She lifted the paper. She read the first name. She read the second. She read the third, and her stomach moved. The third name on the list was Garrett Rowe. The fifth name on the list was the detective who had told her kindly that most stalking cases were ex-boyfriends. The seventh name on the list was Hector, the security guard who had a daughter named Marisol, who wanted to be a vet. She felt the room narrow. She looked up at Damien. "Damien." "Yes." "My boss is on this list." "Yes." "The detective who took my reports is on this list." "Yes." "The security guard in my building." He did not answer. He did not have to. She set the paper down on the desk. She put both her hands flat on the wood on either side of it. She breathed in. She breathed out. She thought about her cubicle. She thought about the framed photograph of the governor in the hall. She thought about Hector saying elevators are open with his radio half raised. She thought about the bird on her welcome mat. She thought about the lights on in her apartment when she had turned them off. She thought about the Polaroid of herself asleep, taken from the foot of the bed by someone who had stood over her body in the dark while she dreamed. She had been alone, she had thought. She had been the opposite of alone. She had been the most carefully watched woman in the city of Chicago for 6 months, and every single person who had been kind to her, every single person whose name she knew, every single person she had thanked or tipped or trusted, had been on a payroll she had not known existed. There was no one left. There was no apartment to go back to. There was no job to clear her name from. There was no detective to file a final report with. There was no Hector at the front desk to bring coffee to. There was no version of Evelyn Vale that existed outside this room, because every door that version had walked through for the last 6 months had been a door Matteo Moretti had built for her to walk through. She felt her hands stop shaking. It was not bravery. It was something colder. It was the click a lock makes when you finally turn the key the right way. She lifted her head. Damien was watching her. He was watching her the way a man watches a fuse burn, and he was not afraid of what it would reach, and he was not trying to put it out. "Get me Cyrus," she said. "Evelyn, get me Cyrus, Damien, and get me the senior man in your house who knows where every safe is and what's in them, and get me coffee. Black. And get me a phone that isn't mine, because mine has been listening to me since June, and clear this desk. I need the surface." He did not move for a second. Then he smiled. It was not a happy smile either. It was a small, dark, surprised smile, and it changed his face in a way that scared her and did not scare her at the same time. "Yes," he said. He walked to the door. He opened it. He spoke, quiet, to whoever was on the other side. He came back. He stood beside her at the desk, and he did not crowd her, he did not touch her. He just stood close enough that she could feel the heat of his arm beside hers, and he waited. She picked up the small black notebook. She opened it to the first page. She started to read. She had 38 minutes before Sloane Moretti's car reached the city limits, and a phone call was made to a man in a basement in Queens, and the only weapon Evelyn Vale had left in the world, which was a lie no one had been able to verify yet, turned, in the dark, into the rope she would either climb or hang from before sunrise. She read faster. Behind her the fire burned, and the first far headlights of the second car of the night turned off the main road and began, patient and certain, the headlights stopped at the gate. They did not climb the driveway. They sat at the bottom of the slope with their high beams pointed straight up at the house, two cold white eyes 1,000 yards out, and they did not move for the next 4 minutes. Evelyn saw them through the library window when she lifted her head from the notebook. She did not stop reading. She marked the page with her finger and she watched the lights and she thought, they are waiting on instructions. Cyrus came through the door without knocking. He had a different coat on. There was a strap across his chest now that had not been there before, and there was something heavy under his left arm under the coat, and the easy stillness from the car ride was gone out of him. He looked 20 years younger and 10 times more dangerous. 2 on the gate, he said. Sedan, cleaned plates. 2 more cars at the gas station at the bottom of the county road. 4 in each. We're being counted. How long? Damien said. 15 minutes if they're patient. 8 if they're not. They'll be patient. They won't, sir. Why? Because they brought a man with a radio who isn't talking. Damien's jaw moved. Get Tomas on the south fence, he said. Get Reyes to the panic room with the Hollander tapes. Get my father's box from the wall in the wine cellar and put it in the cellar passage. Burn the rest of the desk. Now. Cyrus did not say yes, sir. He turned and was gone. The door did not close all the way behind him. Evelyn could hear feet moving in the foyer now, several pairs, fast and clipped, and a woman's voice somewhere upstairs saying, take only what fits in the bag, and a man's voice somewhere closer saying, all the way down, do not stop on 2. And the house she had walked into 46 minutes ago, the empty, quiet, beautiful house, had become a different house. It was a hive. It was a body. It was preparing for something. Damien turned back to her. Evelyn, I'm not going to the panic room. You don't even know where the panic room is. I'm not going to it. Evelyn, Damien. She set the notebook flat on the desk. She kept her voice even. I have read 4 pages. I have 11 names and 3 account numbers and a meeting schedule. I have nothing yet that I can use against your half-brother. I have nothing yet that I can use against Sloane. If you put me in a room with a steel door and a cot, in 40 minutes you will have a war on this property and no one with paper to end it with. Let me read. Give me Cyrus's earpiece. Let me hear what he hears. I will not be in your way. He looked at her. It was not a soft look. It was the look of a man weighing the weight of a stranger, the weight of a stranger who had become someone else in the last hour. And he did not like what it cost him to weigh her, and he did it anyway. Reyes, he said into the doorway. A young man appeared in the doorway. 26, maybe. A scar across his upper lip that puckered when he tried to keep his face still. You don't leave this room, Damien said to him. You stand at that door. She does not leave this room either. If you hear glass break anywhere in the east wing, you put her under the desk, and you put yourself between her and the door. If you hear me call your name twice from any other room in the house, you move her down through the passage in the wine cellar to the river road. Are we clear? Sir, if she tells you she needs something, water, a phone, paper, you get it. If she tells you she's leaving the room, you stop her with your hands and not your gun. Are we clear? Sir? Reyes. Yes, sir. She is in charge of paper. She is not in charge of safety. Both things are true at the same time. Yes, sir. Damien turned back to her. He did not say anything else. He took 2 long steps to the desk. He put his hand, very briefly, on the back of her neck. Not hard. Not soft. Just there. Long enough that she felt the calluses on his thumb. Long enough that she could not breathe right for a second. Then he was moving toward the door, and his jacket was off as he went. And the gun at the small of his back was no longer hidden, and he was already barking a name into a phone that had appeared in his hand, and he was gone. Reyes closed the door. He took 2 steps to the side of it and stopped, hands clasped low in front of him, eyes on the middle distance the way men with scars on their lips have been taught to keep their eyes when there is a woman in the room they are not supposed to look at. The fire popped. Evelyn picked up the notebook. The next 4 pages were dates. The pages after that were photographs paper-clipped to printed pages. A man at a steakhouse on Bay Street, hands cupped around a coffee mug, talking to another man whose face Evelyn could not see. A receipt from a hotel in Niagara Falls, a passenger manifest from a private flight that had landed at Gary Regional 11 days ago. A list of wire transfers from an LLC in Belize to an LLC in Wyoming to a third LLC in Delaware. And the third LLC had a single director listed, and the director's name was Matteo Vance, and Vance was an anglicization of Moretti. The way forward was an anglicization of nothing. And Evelyn knew, she knew with the absolute certainty of a paralegal who had spent 4 years staring at shell company filings for 60 hours a week, that whoever had written this notebook had given her, in 11 pages, enough to put a man in federal custody by Tuesday. If she lived to Tuesday. She turned the page. The next page was a printed email. It was from her own work address. It was dated 3 weeks ago. It was sent at 2:14 on a Sunday morning from her workstation to an outside address. The subject line was empty. The body of the email contained the 3 exhibits that had been removed from the Hargrove deposition. The send timestamp was 12 seconds before the surveillance footage Garrett Rowe had played for her this morning had begun recording. She stared at the page. She read it again. The footer of the email contained an IP address. The IP address was not her workstation. The IP address was the static IP of a server farm in suburban Toronto, which meant whoever had sent that email had not sent it from her cubicle on a Sunday morning at all. They had sent it from a basement in Canada through a hijacked credential, and Blackwood and Rowe's IT director had either missed it or seen it and lied. And either way, Garrett Rowe knew because Garrett Rowe was on Sloane's list, which meant Garrett Rowe was on Matteo's payroll, which meant the entire chain of evidence that had been used to ruin her career this morning had been built by a man who had been waiting for her phone call to Damien for 6 months. Evelyn put her hand over her mouth. She did not cry. She did not throw up. She breathed through her nose, slow, 3 times, the way her foster mother had taught her to breathe before she walked into the school where she was the new girl for the 4th time in 2 years. She picked up the phone Reyes had set on the corner of the desk for her. It was a new phone. No contacts. No history. A line of factory tape still on the screen. She peeled the tape off. She dialed a number from memory. 3 rings. 4. 5. A woman's voice picked up, groggy, irritated. Hello? Marisol. A pause. Who is this? Marisol, this is Evelyn, from your dad's building. The lady who brings him coffee. A longer pause. Ms. Vale? Marisol, I need you to listen to me. Where is your father right now? He's at work. He's at the building. He works the night shift, ma'am. You know that. Marisol, he's not at the building. The girl went quiet. Evelyn closed her eyes. Sweetheart, listen to me very carefully. I think your dad is in trouble. I think he has been doing something for some people, and they have stopped needing him to do it. I think if you call him right now and he doesn't answer, you take your mother and you take your brother and you get in your car and you drive to your aunt's house in Joliet, and you do not stop, and you do not tell anyone you're leaving, and you do not call anyone except your mother's sister, and you stay there for 2 weeks. Do you understand me? Ms. Vale, do you understand me, Marisol? You're scaring me. Good. She hung up. She set the phone down on the desk. She breathed in, breathed out, and she opened the notebook to the next page. 3 pages later, she heard the first gunshot. It was not close. It was somewhere far down the slope, somewhere near the gate, a single hard crack like a tree branch breaking in a freeze, and Reyes's whole body went still beside the door, and his hand moved toward his hip and stopped, and he did not move otherwise. Evelyn kept reading. There were 2 more shots, then a flurry of them, 4, 5, 6, the sound of small dry firecrackers a long way off, and somewhere on the other side of the house, a man yelled a single word she could not make out. and she heard feet on the stone of the foyer running, and she heard a door slam, and she heard Cyrus's voice somewhere shouting, "South, south, south," and she heard glass break. Reyes moved. He did not put her under the desk. He turned the desk on its side instead, fast and hard with his shoulder, and the heavy mahogany fell with a crash that knocked her notebook to the floor and sent the envelope sliding across the rug. And Reyes pulled her down behind the upturned desk with one hand on her shoulder, and his gun was in his other hand now and pointed at the door. "Quiet, ma'am," he said. She was quiet. The shots got closer. There were two more close ones, very close, somewhere inside the foyer, and then there was a long, awful silence that lasted maybe 4 seconds, and then she heard a body fall. It was not the sound of a body falling in a movie. It was a wet sound, and a heavy one, and the heaviness was the worst part of it. Reyes's lips moved. He was praying, but not the kind of praying that had words. His eyes did not leave the door. Footsteps in the foyer, not running, walking, 2 sets, 3, 4. The library doors opened. Damien came through them first. His left sleeve was wet to the elbow. His shirt was open at the second button now, not the first, and there was a long line of dark red along his collarbone that ran into the fabric below. His gun was in his right hand and the slide was open, empty, and he was already pulling a second magazine out of his back pocket as he came through the door. Behind him came Cyrus, who was bleeding from a place above his ear that he had not bothered to wipe. Behind Cyrus came 2 men Evelyn did not know, dragging a third man between them by the shoulders. The third man was alive. His feet dragged on the rug. His head was down. His hair was black and short, and there was a thin gold chain visible at the back of his neck where the collar of his shirt had been pulled aside, and the chain had a small medallion on it that Evelyn did not look at long enough to identify. "Up," Damien said. The 2 men hauled the third man upright. He lifted his head. He was 36, maybe. Black hair, a face that was clearly Damien's face, was clearly the same bones, the same jaw, but built 2 inches narrower and 20 years harder, like the same statue carved out of a different stone. A split lip, a bruise rising under his right eye. He was breathing through his nose because his mouth was full of blood and a chipped tooth he had not spat out. He looked at Damien. He smiled. The smile was the same smile. "Hello, fratello," Matteo Moretti said. His voice was flat and dry, not afraid. "Hello," Damien said. "This is more elaborate than I planned. Mason was sloppy. Mason was an instrument. Mason is dead, Matteo. I know. You killed him. I had him killed. There's a difference." "There isn't." Matteo turned his head. He had to do it slowly because his ribs had been broken somewhere between the gate and the library, and the breath whistled out of him as he turned, and his eyes, Damien's eyes, gray-green and too still, found Evelyn behind the desk. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked back at Damien. "She's not what I thought she'd be," he said. "Don't. You read her file too, brother. You know what I mean." "Matteo, I expected something soft. I expected a small frightened animal. I would not have spent 6 months on a small frightened animal, brother, but you would have. And that was enough for me. But she is not a small frightened animal, is she? She just lied to Sloane Moretti's face about a diary that does not exist and walked out of that room alive, which is more than the last 20 people who tried have managed." Damien's face did not move. Evelyn stood up from behind the desk. Reyes made a small sound of objection. She put her hand on his shoulder, light, and stepped around him. She walked, slow, across the rug. She stopped 6 feet from Matteo. His eyes followed her the whole way. He was hurt. He was bleeding from a place under his jaw she could not see. But his eyes had not gotten any softer, and when she stopped in front of him, she understood, all at once, the particular kind of cold she was standing in front of. This was not Damien's cold. Damien's cold was a wall. Damien's cold was a man who had been built into a knife by a father he had stopped speaking to and was trying, late and badly, to stop being a knife. Matteo's cold was different. Matteo's cold was a man who had been told, at 19, on his own mother's funeral, that he was an accident his father had paid not to exist, and Matteo's cold had been growing in him every day since, and it was not a wall. It was an appetite. She looked into it. How long have you been watching me? She said. Mateo's mouth moved at the corner. 6 months. From where? Toronto. How many men? In Chicago at any given time, 4, sometimes 5. In my building, 2. In my apartment, 1 for 63 minutes on the morning of the 17th, which is when you put the camera, which is when I put the cameras. How many cameras? 4. Where? Living room, bedroom, bathroom, kitchen. Damien made a sound behind her. It was small. It was a single short breath. Evelyn did not turn. She did not take her eyes off Mateo. She had a question that mattered more than the bathroom, and she needed to ask it before Damien did something she could not take back. Why? She said. Mateo blinked. Why me? She said. You have a list. You have 11 names from this house. You could have taken anyone on that list. Why a paralegal? Because of him. That's not an answer. It is the only answer. It's lazy, Mateo. His eyebrows moved up half an inch. Lazy? You spent 6 months and 4 men and 7 figures and a half-brother you don't trust for a woman you've never met because your brother looked at her in a ballroom. That is not strategy. That is appetite. That is a man who never got to sit at his father's table eating the table itself. I have read your file too, Mateo. I read it in the last 20 minutes. You are not a clever man. You are a hungry one. You are going to lose to him eventually because hunger does not last as long as patience does. And your brother has been patient for 38 years, and you have been hungry for 17. His face did something then. It moved. A muscle high in his cheek twitched, and his mouth opened a half inch, and for the first time since they had dragged him into the room, he was no longer smiling, and Evelyn felt it the way you feel the tide go out before the wave comes in. I'm going to remember you, Mateo said quietly. I know. You should be afraid of that. I am. You don't look afraid. I'm a paralegal, she said. We are taught to look like we are not afraid in front of opposing counsel. He laughed. It was a short, hard sound. Then he spat the chipped tooth onto the rug. It bounced once. Damien stepped up beside her. He did not touch her. He did not say her name. He looked at his half-brother and he said, very evenly, Where are Sloane's people? On their way. How many? Enough. Mateo? You won't get a number out of me, brother. You know that. You're going to give me one. I'm going to give you nothing. You have the same name as me, brother, and I have been preparing for you since I was 19 years old. You will not break me in this room with a bag over my head and a chair under me, because there is nothing left in me to break that he did not already break. Damien stood very still. Our father, he said. Yes. You met him once, in a hotel in Rome. He gave me $40,000 in cash and a bottle of grappa, and told me he would have my mother declared posthumously insane in any court I tried to sue him in, and he hugged me at the door like an uncle, brother. He hugged me like I was his sister's child. And I went home, and I drank the grappa, and I have been drinking it in my head every night since. You think I owe you? No. Then what? I think you gotta be his son, Mateo said. I think you gotta wear his name on a building. I think you gotta walk into rooms where men stood up when you came in and sat down when you left. I think you gotta be loved by him in the only ugly way he knew how to love anything. And I think the moment you finally let yourself want a woman, brother, it was because you saw a woman who had been raised by a stranger, the way I was raised by a stranger, and you thought you could give her the thing you never got given. And I could not let you give it to her. I could not. Not while I was still standing here without it. The library was silent. The fire had died down to coals. Evelyn looked at Damien. Damien looked at his half-brother. A long second passed. Damien lifted his gun. He did not point it at Mateo's head. He pointed it at Mateo's right knee. Hold him, he said. The 2 men holding Mateo gripped tighter. Damien, Evelyn said. Don't. Damien, listen to me. Evelyn, if you do this, you don't get him to talk. If you do this, he goes into shock in 30 seconds, and we lose the next 4 hours, and Sloane's men get here before we have anything to negotiate with. Damien. Damien. Look at me. He did not look at her. His finger was tight on the trigger. She stepped sideways. She put her body between the gun and Mateo's knee. Reyes made a strangled sound by the door. Move, Damien said. No. Evelyn, move. He is the only thing in this room that is worth more than what you can do to him. You shoot him, you lose him. You lose him, you lose this house. You lose this house. You lose me. Damien, listen, listen. He looked at her. The gun did not lower. I have read 4 more pages while you were gone, she said. Her voice was steady. She did not know how. I have everything I need. I have shell companies. I have wire transfers. I have a passenger manifest. I have an email from a server farm in Toronto that puts him at the keyboard the night the Hargrove documents were altered. I have a way to put him in federal custody by Tuesday, Damien. Federal custody. In a cell where Sloan cannot reach him, and your other cousin cannot reach him, and the man in scrubs from Cook County cannot reach him. I do not need him dead. I need him processed. And I need him alive long enough to walk into a courtroom and look at the picture of his own face on Mason Kowalski's phone, because that is the only ending to this that does not leave you a man who killed his brother, Damien, and you are not, Mom, that man yet. His jaw moved. He has been in my city for 6 months, Damien said. He has had cameras in your apartment for 63 minutes. He has stood over you while you slept. I know. He took photographs of you while you slept. I know. I'm going to be the man who killed his brother, Evelyn. I have been that man since they dragged him through the foyer. The only question is whether I do it now, in this room, in front of you, or whether I do it in 8 hours in a basement with a hood over my own face so that I never have to look at him again. And I want to do it now. Because if I do it later, I will have lied to you between now and then, and I will not be able to look at you again either. The room held. Evelyn did not move. She kept her body between the gun and the knee. Behind her, Mateo laughed very softly. It was not a healthy laugh. It was the laugh of a man who has just realized he is not the most interesting thing happening in his own death. She is going to ruin you, brother, he said. Shut up, Damien said. She is going to ruin you in a way I never could have. I see it now. I see what you saw. I should have left her alone. Shut up, Mateo. Brother, shut up. You're going to hesitate. He smiled, blood on his teeth. And I have men in the trees. The library window blew inward. It blew inward in a single hard sheet, glass and lead, and the old wooden frame all at once. And the noise was not a noise. It was a slap across the inside of Evelyn's ears, and the rug at her feet was suddenly covered in small, bright bits of glass that caught the firelight like 1,000 small, wet eyes. And somewhere in the same half-second, Reyes shouted from the door, and Cyrus shouted from the hall, and the 2 men holding Mateo dropped him, both of them, at the same time, and they dropped him because there were 2 small dark holes in the front of Cyrus's right-hand man's shirt that had not been there a second before, and the man was sliding down the wall behind him, leaving a long red smear on the wallpaper, and his eyes were already done looking at anything. Damien turned fast, gun up. A second shot came through the broken window. It missed his shoulder by an inch. It hit the painting behind him, dead center, and the painting's frame split with a crack that sounded almost personal. Damien shoved Evelyn down. Hard. She hit the rug with her shoulder and her cheek and the side of her jaw, and the glass got into her cheek in 3 places at once, small and hot, and she did not feel it yet. She only felt the floor and the sound of her own breath going out of her lungs at the wrong speed, and then Damien was over her, on his knees, his body between her and the window, and he was firing back through the broken frame, and the muzzle flash made the room flicker like a dying light bulb. Mateo was crawling. Evelyn saw him from the floor. He was crawling, slow and one-handed, toward the desk, toward the notebook, toward the envelope, toward the only paper in the building that could put him away. He had a piece of broken glass in his other hand. The way a man holds a knife in a fight, he did not bring a knife to, and there was blood running freely from his mouth now, and he was dragging his right leg the way Damien had threatened to make him drag it, but he was moving. He was moving fast for a man with a broken rib and a broken tooth and a half-brother with a gun, and Evelyn understood, with a low, cold clarity, that if Mateo Moretti reached that desk before she did, the next 60 minutes of her life were going to end with her in the trunk of a car, the way Damien had said the very first time she set foot inside this house. She moved. She did not think about it. She moved on her elbows across glass that bit into her forearms through the cashmere, and she heard herself make a sound that was not a word, and she crawled past Damien's planted boot, and she crawled out from under the cover of his body, and Damien yelled her name behind her, Evelyn, once. sharp, and she did not stop. She reached the leg of the upturned desk a half second before Matteo did. Their hands met on the notebook at the same time. His fingers were warm and wet. Her fingers closed first. He pulled. She pulled back. He laughed, soft, blood between his teeth. "Paralegal," he whispered. She pulled the notebook toward her chest with everything she had left. He came with it. He came across the rug on his ruined knee, and his shoulder hit hers, and the broken glass in his hand came up fast between them, and she saw it coming, and there was nothing under her hands to block it with except the notebook itself. And she did not block it with the notebook because the notebook was the only thing in the room she had left. So she did the only other thing she could do. She turned her face into it. The edge of the glass went into the soft place under her jaw, just below the ear, in a long, bright line that did not hurt yet but would hurt later, and her own warm blood was suddenly on her collarbone and inside the open neck of her sweater, and the room went very loud and very quiet at the same time. And somewhere a long way away, Damien was screaming her name in a voice she had never heard him use before. And somewhere closer, Matteo was breathing hard against her ear, and his other hand was on the notebook, both hands now, and he had it. He had the corner of it, and he was pulling it out from under her with the last strength he had left in his body, and her grip was slipping, and her vision was going dark at the edges, and the only thing she could think, the only thought that her brain was still able to put together in any kind of order, was, Marisol wanted to be a vet. That was the thought. That was the only thought. A child she had never met wanted to be a vet, and the child's father had taken money from a man who had been watching Evelyn brush her teeth. And the child was either in a car right now driving to Joliet, or she was in a kitchen calling her father's phone over and over and listening to it ring against a dead man's hip, and Evelyn was not going to die on this rug before she found out which. She let go of the notebook. Matteo did not expect it. His weight was pulling against hers, and her hands opened, and his own pull took him backward, off balance, his ruined knee skidding out from under him on the broken glass. And as he went back, she came up off the rug with everything she had left in her, which was not much, which was a single coiled motion driven by nothing but the cold heat under her ribs, and she drove the heel of her hand straight up into his throat, not into his jaw, not into his nose, his throat. She had learned that in a self-defense class in a community center basement 8 years ago. She had been the only student. The instructor had been a 60-year-old woman with a smoker's voice who had told her, "Honey, you are not going to outpunch a man, but a windpipe is a windpipe, and a windpipe does not care how big you are." She hit him in the windpipe. Matteo made a sound that was not a sound. It was a vacuum. It was air trying to find a way out of a room that had been sealed. His eyes went enormous. The hand with the glass in it dropped. The notebook hit the rug between them and slid 2 inches, no more, and Evelyn slid with it. She got her left hand around it. She rolled. Behind her, Damien fired 4 more shots through the broken window in a long, even rhythm, and then there was no return fire from outside. And then he was on her, on his knees, and his hands were on her face, on her jaw, on the wet place under her ear. And he was saying her name in a voice she had not heard from him yet, a voice that did not belong to the man at the gala, did not belong to the man at the fireplace, did not belong to any man she had ever known. "Evelyn, Evelyn, Evelyn, I have it." "What?" "I have the notebook." "I don't care about the notebook." "You have to. Damien, you have to." "Evelyn, take it from me." He took it. His hand closed around the leather, and the corner of his palm came away red where her grip had been, and he stuffed the notebook inside his jacket against his ribs, and then both his hands came back to her face. He pressed his palm flat against the cut under her jaw. He pressed hard. He pressed too hard in the way of a man who has watched too many people bleed out from cuts in that exact place and is trying to put a thumb on a faucet he is not strong enough to close. "Cyrus," he said, without turning his head. "Here. Get the doctor. Now." "He's on the South Road." "How far?" 6 minutes. 3. 3, sir." Cyrus was gone. Evelyn could not feel the cut. She knew that was bad. She knew, from the same paralegal job she was never going back to, from the medical malpractice cases she had paperworked, that not being able to feel a thing in the head and neck meant shock had arrived, and shock arriving meant the body had decided to start prioritizing, and prioritizing meant the body had given up on parts. "Damien, don't talk." "Damien, Evelyn, don't." "Matteo, he's not going anywhere. He's still alive." He's not going anywhere, Evelyn. Look at me. Look at me. She looked at him. He had glass in his hair. He had her blood on his jaw and his neck and the front of his open shirt, and his eyes were very bright and very wet and very level. And she had never seen his face that close before. And she understood in that exact moment why men who had spent 30 years in rooms full of dangerous men had spent the last 6 months calling Damien Moretti sir without being asked to. It was not because of anything Damien did with his face. It was because of what his face did not do. His face did not move. Even now, even with her blood on it. His face had been trained by a father she did not know and would never meet to not move when he was breaking, because moving when he was breaking was how men in his life had taught other men they were weak. And weak men in his life had been buried in places without names. And so even now, with his thumb in her wound and his other hand cradling the back of her skull off the rug, and the room around him on fire with broken glass and shouting men and the wet body of a half-brother he had loved and hated in the same breath, Damien Moretti's face did not move. It just looked at her. It just looked at her the way a man looks at the one thing in his life he does not yet believe he gets to keep. "You're not dying tonight," he said. "Okay. You are not dying in this house. You are not dying on this rug. You are not dying on my watch." "Okay, Damien. Say my name again." "Damien." "Again." "Damien." "Stay with me, Evelyn. Stay here. Stay in this room." "I'm here." She was here. She was here, and the room was not getting darker yet, and the cut under her jaw had begun to hurt. Finally, a sharp, clean line of fire from her ear down into her collarbone, and the pain was good. The pain was very good. The pain meant the nerve had not been cut. The pain meant the artery had not been cut. The pain meant she had been lucky in a way that paralegals who had paperworked enough medical malpractice cases learned to bargain for. The doctor came in 6 minutes, not 3. He was a small, soft man in a windbreaker. The windbreaker zipped wrong, like he had been pulled out of bed. He had a bag. He did not look at Damien. He looked at the wound. He pressed his own gloved fingers around Damien's, and Damien did not let go, and the doctor did not ask him to. "Press," the doctor said. "I am. Harder. I am pressing as hard as I can." "Harder than that, Mr. Moretti." Evelyn closed her eyes. She felt them work on her. She felt the cold sting of something on the wound, and a tug, and a tug, and a tug, and she felt them put 6 stitches into the soft place under her jaw with a thread that smelled like nothing at all. And somewhere across the room she heard another man's voice, smaller and rougher, saying, "Get him on his side, get him on his side, do not let him aspirate." And she understood that they were not going to let Matteo die in this library either. That was the right decision. She had told Damien that. She had told him with broken glass in her cheek and a half-brother bleeding next to her. Federal custody. Tuesday. A cell where Sloane could not reach him. She had told him because she had known, in the deep place under all the fear, that the only way they got out of this house with a future was if Damien did not become the man who killed his brother on the same rug where he had asked her to marry him later. She opened her eyes. The doctor was tying off the last stitch. "Try not to talk for the next hour," he said. "I have to," she said. "You don't." "I do." She turned her head. Matteo was on his side 10 feet away. There was a bandage at his throat. His eyes were open. He was breathing, slow, rough, awake. 2 of Damien's men knelt beside him with their hands on his shoulders and his hip, holding him still without holding him hard. Reyes stood over them with his gun pointed at the rug. Matteo looked at Evelyn. She looked back. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say in this room. They had both said it. He had told her why, and she had told him why he was going to lose, and the fact that they were both still breathing was not victory, was not anything as clean as victory. It was the long aftermath of a wave that had finally finished rolling over them both. She felt no pity for him. She felt no satisfaction either. She felt, when she looked into his gray-green eyes that were Damien's eyes set in a different face, the same thing she had felt for the small dead bird on her welcome mat 3 weeks ago. She felt that something had been broken by people, a long time ago, that no one in this room had had the strength to put back together. She closed her eyes again. The sun came up at 6:42. Evelyn watched it come up from a deep leather chair in the library, with a blanket across her knees and a bandage on her jaw and a cup of hot tea in her hands that she had not drunk. Damien sat across from her in the chair he had stood in front of the night before. The fire had burned itself down to gray. The window had been boarded with a piece of plywood someone had found in a barn. There was a long brown stain on the rug between them that had not been there at midnight. Sloane had called twice. Damien had not picked up. The third time, he had picked up. He had not spoken into the phone. He had let Sloane speak. He had listened for 1 minute and 40 seconds. Then he had said, very evenly, "It's over. He's gone. Federal custody by 10. And he had hung up, and he had set the phone on the table between them, and he had not looked at it again. Sloane was not going to be a problem now. Evelyn understood this without him having to say it. Sloane was a woman who counted moves. The move had been counted. Sloane's husband was a problem that would handle itself within 48 hours, the way men in that world handled themselves when the wind changed. And Sloane would be a widow with a future just the way she had wanted, and she would not, ever, come for Evelyn again, because Sloane Moretti did not waste a second move on someone who had survived the first. Mateo had left the house in an unmarked van at 5:11 in the morning, on a gurney, breathing through a tube, conscious. 2 federal agents had been waiting at the bottom of the driveway in a black sedan with no markings. The notebook had gone with him. The envelope had gone with him. The 11 names had been delivered by Damien's lawyer, in person, to a U.S. attorney in the Northern District of Illinois at 4:30 in the morning in a parking lot, in exchange for an immunity letter that was not for Damien. It was for Evelyn. She had not asked for it. He had asked for it for her. "You'll never sit at a deposition table again," he had told her in the back of the library at 4:50, while the doctor cleaned the last of the glass out of her cheek. "I cannot give you back your career at that firm. I cannot give you back your name. But I can give you a piece of paper that says nothing you have read or written or witnessed in the last 48 hours will ever follow you into a courtroom as a defendant. The rest of your life, what you do with it, where you go, who you are, that is yours. Not mine. Yours." "I haven't decided what I want it to be yet," she had said. "I know. I might decide it's not here. I know. I might decide it's not you." He had looked at her for a long time. "I know," he had said again, very quietly, "and I will not stand in the doorway." Now, at 6:42, with the sun coming up gray through the boarded window and the cup of tea going cold in her hands, Evelyn looked across the rug at Damien Moretti and she said, "Hector." "Yes." "His daughter. She is in Joliet. She is with her aunt. They left at 4:15 in the morning. They drove in the aunt's car. They are safe. They will stay safe. I have arranged for the daughter, Marisol, to attend the vet program at Illinois on a full scholarship beginning in the fall, in a fund that does not have my name on it. She will never know it was me. She will never know it was you. She will think it was luck." Hector himself. Damien did not answer for a moment. Then he said, "Hector took money for 6 months. He let men into the building who should not have been in the building. He turned a camera off on the 17th of June for 63 minutes. He is not a soldier. He is a security guard who needed a daughter to go to college. I have not made a decision about Hector." "Don't." "Evelyn, don't make one. Let it not be a decision. He will spend the rest of his life thinking someone is coming for him. Damien, that is enough. That is more than enough. He will know what he did every time his daughter calls him from her dorm room. He will know what he did at every Sunday dinner for the rest of his life. He will know it the way I would have known it. Let it be that. Don't be the man who decides about Hector." He looked at her. "Okay," he said. "Promise me." "I promise you." Garrett Rowe. Garrett Rowe will be indicted on Wednesday morning. Sloane's notebook had him for 3 separate counts of evidence tampering and 1 of conspiracy. He will not work in the law again. He will not be the man who fires you. He will be the man who is fired. She nodded. She drank finally from the tea. It was cold. She did not mind. The detective from her stalking reports, the one who had been so kind, so statistical, so quietly patient with the woman who could not give him a name, had been on Sloane's list as well, 5th from the top. He would lose his badge by the end of the month. He would not lose anything else, because Damien, when she had asked him at 5:30 in the morning whether he had made a decision about the detective, had said, "I made one. I unmade it. He'll lose his pension. That's the decision. That's the line." She had let him keep that decision. She had not asked him to unmake anymore. There were limits to what a woman could ask another person to be. In a single night, and Evelyn had reached the limit of what she could ask Damien Moretti to be by the time the sun came up. She did not ask anything else of him. She did not need to. She had seen him put his thumb in her wound for 6 minutes without his face moving. And she had seen him lower a gun he had wanted to fire because a paralegal had told him not to. And she did not need any further evidence about the shape of the man across the rug. She needed evidence about the shape of herself. She set the tea down. She stood up. The blanket fell off her knees, the bandage at her jaw pulled. A small, bright tug. "I want to see my apartment," she said. He did not move from his chair. "There are 4 cameras in it." "I know." "There may be more we haven't found." "I know." "Evelyn, I want to see it, Damien. Not to stay. To see. There is a watercolor set in the closet next to the water heater that belonged to my foster mother. There is a key and a Christmas card in the desk drawer that opens a safe deposit box at a bank on LaSalle that my foster mother left me when she died. There is a photograph of me and her at the lake the summer I was 13. That is the only photograph of me as a child that anyone took. I am not leaving those things in that apartment for whoever rents it next. I am not leaving them in a house Mateo bought cameras for. I'm going to get them. Today. With you or without you, but today." Damien stood up. "With me," he said. The apartment had been searched. Evelyn could tell the moment she walked through the door. Not because anything was visibly out of place. Mateo's men had been good, professional, careful, but because she had spent 23 days noticing everything in this apartment that was the wrong half-inch from where it should have been, and now nothing was. Now everything had been put back exactly by men who had measured exactly. The fern on the windowsill was tilted toward the window the way it had not been when she was a child, the way it had only been since the 17th of June. The throw blanket on the back of the couch was folded the way she folded it on laundry days, never on weekdays. The apartment was wearing a costume of itself. "Cameras," Damien said behind her from the doorway. Cyrus came in past him with a small black device in his hand the size of a flashlight. He swept it, slow, across the ceiling. It buzzed once. He pointed up at the corner above the bookcase. He swept again. It buzzed at the smoke detector. He swept the bedroom doorway. It buzzed at the heating vent. 4, Cyrus said. He told the truth about 4. He turned to leave. Evelyn caught his sleeve. "Cyrus?" "Ma'am." "Don't take them yet." He looked at Damien. Damien did not move. "I want to walk through this apartment one more time," she said, "while the cameras are watching. Because somewhere on a server in Toronto, there is a man who has been watching me eat cereal in this kitchen for 6 months, and I want him to see me. I want him to see me with this bandage on my jaw, and my hand in another man's hand, and a key to a safe deposit box in my pocket, and a watercolor set under my arm, and I want him to understand that he is lost. And then you can take the cameras out, Cyrus, and you can drop them in Lake Michigan, and I will never set foot in this apartment again." Cyrus looked at her for a long moment. His face did something it had not done in the car, or in the house, or at any moment since. It softened, just at the corner of the mouth, just enough that she saw, for 1 second, the man he had been before he had been the man he was now. "Yes, ma'am," he said. He left. She walked through her apartment slowly. She walked through the kitchen, where she had eaten cold lo mein on a Sunday night 3 weeks ago, while the watchers watched her. She walked through the living room where she had watched the documentary about glaciers. She walked into the bedroom where the bed had been made by hands that were not hers. She did not touch the bed. She did not look at the camera. She went to the closet. She found the watercolor set on the top shelf where she had put it the month she had stopped going to the community center class. She held it against her chest. She went to the desk. She opened the second drawer. The Christmas card was where she had left it. "Merry Christmas, Evie. Love you forever. M." The handwriting was small and careful. The card was 12 years old. The key was taped to the inside. She took the key. She closed the drawer. She turned slowly in the middle of the bedroom. She did not look at any of the cameras. She did not give the watchers her face. She gave them her back and her shoulders and the line of her spine straightening under the light. And she said out loud to no one and to all of them, "Goodbye." Then she walked out. Cyrus took the cameras out the next morning. She did not see him do it. She was 60 miles away by then. The wedding was 11 months later. It was small. It was not a Moretti wedding. There were no senators, no business tycoons, no former criminals shaking hands across the buffet table. There were 42 people in a stone room with a fireplace on the same property where she had bled on the rug, and Cyrus walked her down a short aisle in a suit that fit him in a way no suit had fit him in 20 years, and his eyes were dry until the moment they were not. And he handed her off to Damien at the front of the room without saying a word, because Cyrus had become, in 11 months of quiet weekly dinners she had insisted on, the closest thing to a father Evelyn Vale had ever had. And Cyrus understood, in the way that men of his particular life understood things, that this was a moment for which there were no words yet that did not cheapen it. She did not wear a veil. She did not wear white. She wore a soft gray dress with long sleeves that came down over the wrist where the old bruise had been, where there was now a small, thin tattoo of a single line of script in handwriting she had asked the artist to copy from a 12-year-old Christmas card. Love you forever. M. She was 28 credits into law school by then. She had taken the LSAT in a folding chair classroom in a city she had not lived in before. She had scored well. She had been accepted at a state school that did not know her by either of her names, the one she had been born with or the one she would take. She had told them she was a paralegal in transition. She had been honest about everything except the months between June and December of her 31st year, and the honesty about everything else had been enough. Damien did not interfere with school. He did not pay her tuition. She had asked him not to. She had told him, in their second week in the new house, the smaller house, the one in a town where no one knew the name Moretti, that the only way she was going to do any of this was if she did it on the salary of the part-time job she had taken at the local courthouse, and the modest amount of money in the safe deposit box on LaSalle that had turned out to contain, in addition to the photograph at the lake, 4 uncashed savings bonds from 1989 that had matured into $31,000, almost to the dollar what her foster mother had made in a year as a school nurse. He had not argued. He had said, "Yes, yours, not mine." He had said it the same way he had said it in the library at 4:50 in the morning, and she had understood that he meant it not as a kindness, but as a contract, and the contract had held. He restructured the empire over those 11 months. He did it slowly. He did it badly, in places, because he had not been trained to do it any other way, and he asked her, often, for the language of paper, the language of paralegals, the language of women who had read 4 years of motion practice for 60 hours a week. She gave him the language. She did not give him decisions. She told him once, in a kitchen in the new house, "I am not your lawyer, Damien. I will not be your lawyer. I will be your wife, and I will tell you when a sentence is wrong, but the decisions are yours. The empire is yours. I will not put my hand on it." He had said, "Then I will put my hand on less of it every year." He did. The shipping company became a shipping company. The clubs became clubs. The political alliances became slowly the kind of awkward distance that politicians treated as deniability and his family treated as betrayal, and 3 of his cousins stopped speaking to him by the end of the second year, and he did not seem to mind, and Evelyn did not ask why. She did not ask about a lot of things. That was the deal they had made in the library at 6:42 in the morning of the day Mateo had been taken away. She would not be lied to. He would not be questioned. She would tell him when a sentence was wrong. He would tell her when a door was closed. They would each, every day, choose the parts of the other they could live with. It worked. It worked the way real things worked, which was unevenly, with bad weeks and very bad weeks, and a stretch in the 3rd year when she did not speak to him for 9 days after she found out he had paid for a man's funeral she had not been told about. And she came back to him on the 10th day because the silence had cost her more than the truth would have, and she told him so. And he listened, and the man's funeral was the last one she ever did not know about. Mateo got 18 years. He did not testify. He did not deal. He did not name the men Sloan had named in the notebook. He sat through his trial in a gray suit and a gray tie, and he looked every day at Evelyn from across the courtroom where she sat in the second row with a notebook on her lap and no expression on her face. And the look between them was not hatred and was not forgiveness. It was the look of 2 people who had ended each other and were both still standing. He died in a prison hospital in his 4th year. Lung infection. The official report was pneumonia. The unofficial report, which Cyrus delivered to her in a kitchen at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, quietly, because he had known her well enough by then to know she needed to hear it from him, was that Mateo had refused his medication for 3 days straight, and that he had told a nurse the day before he stopped speaking, "I am very tired." Evelyn did not cry. She had not expected to. She had felt about Mateo for 4 years, what she had felt about him at the very end, on the rug, in the library. She had felt that something had been broken by people a long time ago that no one in any room had had the strength to put back together. She felt it again that Tuesday afternoon. She poured herself a glass of water. She drank it. She thanked Cyrus. She went back to her contract's homework. That evening, Damien came home and she told him. He sat down in the kitchen chair across from her. He did not speak for a long time. When he finally did, he said, "He was my brother." "I know." "I did not love him." "I know." "I should have." "That is not how love works, Damien." He looked at her. "Will you tell me how love works?" he said. It was the first time she had ever heard him ask a question with no plan inside it. She thought about it for a moment. She thought about her foster mother, who had folded her into a quilted coat at 6 years old on the front porch of a house Evelyn had been afraid to go inside, and who had said, "We can stand here as long as you need to. We don't have to go in until you say." She thought about Cyrus, who had told her in a car, "You're alive, that's fine," and had then spent 4 years quietly making sure she stayed that way. She thought about Hector, who had said elevators are open on the worst morning of her life, and who, the last she had heard, was running a fishing charter in Florida and had a granddaughter now, and had never been visited by anyone she had sent. She thought about Damien, sitting across the kitchen table from her with his hands flat on the wood, asking a question he did not know the answer to for the first time since she had met him. "Love works the way you handed Cyrus the keys to my car last week," she said. He frowned, a small private frown. "That's love? That's love. I handed him the keys because you said you wanted him to drive. And you did not ask why. You wanted him to drive. I wanted him to drive because I have started thinking of him as my father, Damien, and I have never had a father, and I wanted him to drive me to my own appointment without anyone making it a ceremony. And you understood that without asking. You handed him the keys, you sat in the back. You let me have it. That is love. That is the entire shape of it. Not the grand thing, not the gun in the library, the keys, the car, the back seat, the not asking." He sat with that for a while. Then he said, "I would not have known that before you." "I know." "I would have made a ceremony out of it." "I know." "I'm sorry about my brother." "I know." She reached across the table. She put her hand over his. The scar on his collarbone, the long thin one from a bullet that had taken his shirt in the library and almost taken his shoulder, was a white line under the open neck of his shirt now. The scar under her jaw was a small pale thing she could feel with her thumb when she brushed her teeth in the morning. They were both, in their bodies, still wearing the night they had become each other's, and they did not anymore pretend otherwise. Years later, she would graduate. She would not graduate first in her class. She would graduate 12th, because the woman who graduated first had not lost a job and a name and a country in her 31st year, and Evelyn would not begrudge her the first place. She would pass the bar on the second attempt, and Damien would frame the letter, and she would let him, because by then there was very little she did not let him do. That did not put a hand on her future, and the framed letter was just paper. She would not, as she had thought she might, become his chief legal architect. She would do something smaller. She would open a small office in a small town, 2 miles from the house she lived in with the man she had married. She would take, for a fee that did not always exist, the cases of women who had been told, kindly, that most stalking cases were ex-boyfriends. She would believe them when they said it was not an ex-boyfriend. She would file the reports the police had not filed. She would do the paperwork that the women themselves had been told was not necessary, and she would do it well, because the paralegal who had been the best in her class at Blackwood and Row had not died in a stairwell on the 31st floor of a building in Chicago. She had only been rerouted, and she had ended up exactly where she belonged. Cyrus would walk her into the office every Monday morning for the first 3 years. He would not say anything about it. She would not say anything about it. He would just be there, in a coat, in the doorway, until she was inside, and then he would go for a coffee at the bakery across the street, and he would come back at 5, and she would walk to the car with him in silence, the way fathers and daughters of his particular kind of life walked. The watercolor set from the closet in the apartment would sit, unopened, on a shelf in her office for 2 years. Then, on a Saturday afternoon in the third year, after a Friday when a woman in her office had cried for 40 minutes in a chair across from her, and Evelyn had not been able to do anything for her, Evelyn would take the watercolor set down. She would open it. She would find the paint dried and cracked. She would order a new one. She would, that night, paint, badly, a small terrible landscape of a lake she had only seen once when she was 13. The painting would be ugly. Damien would hang it over the fireplace in their bedroom. She would tell him 3 times, "Take it down, that is the worst painting in the world." He would say 3 times, "It is the only thing in this house that is yours and only yours, and it is going to stay where I can see it." It would stay. By the time Evelyn Moretti was 47 years old, the house she lived in with the man she had married was full of bad watercolors. Lakes, mostly. A few trees. A portrait of Cyrus from memory, which Cyrus had cried at and then never mentioned again. The mansion that Damien had inherited from his father had been sold, the year of their 10th anniversary, to a developer who had turned it into a small private hospital that specialized in women who had been hurt by men. And on the wall of the front lobby of the hospital, there was a small bronze plaque that did not bear either of their names, and the plaque read, in a single line of script, "Love you forever. M." On the morning of their 20th anniversary, before he went into a meeting that would close the last of the old territories permanently and transfer the last of the old money into a foundation that would fund foster homes in 3 states and 1 country, Damien Moretti sat on the edge of the bed in the small house in the small town and watched his wife sleep. He had been sitting there for 40 minutes. He did this sometimes. He did it the way a man checks a window to make sure the lock still works. She woke, finally, and she did not move at first. She just opened her eyes, and she found him sitting there, and she did not look surprised. "You've been there a while," she said. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I'm about to leave the house, and I wanted to look at you, and I did not want to wake you." "Damien." "Yes." "Come here." He came. He lay down on top of the covers in his suit beside her. She put her hand against the side of his face. The stubble was gray now. The hair at his temples was almost entirely silver. The scar at his collarbone had faded so far into his skin that you had to know it was there to find it. He closed his eyes, just for a second, against her palm. "I have to go," he said. "I know. I will be back at 6. "I know." He opened his eyes. He looked at her for a long moment, the same way he had looked at her in the library the morning the sun had come up gray through the boarded window, the same way he had looked at her across a ballroom at a charity gala 21 years ago, when a paralegal he did not know had spilled a glass of wine on him and apologized in a voice that had broken something in him he had not known was breakable. "Evelyn?" "Yes." "You saved my life. You saved mine first." "That's not how it happened." "That's how it happened, Damien. That is exactly how it happened. You picked up the phone on the first ring. You did not ask questions. You sent a car. That is the entire shape of it, not the gun in the library. The phone. On the first ring. The not asking." He smiled. It was a slow smile and a tired one, and an honest one, and it was the same smile she had seen for the first time in the library that night. The small, dark, surprised smile of a man who had not expected to be loved this long by a woman who knew this much about him. And he leaned forward, and he kissed her, very gently, on the small, pale scar under her jaw, where the broken edge of a glass had once almost taken everything. Then he got up. He straightened his tie. He went to the door. He looked back at her, once, from the doorway, the way he had looked back at her from a doorway 20 years ago in a house she had nearly died in. 6, he said. 6, she said. He left. Evelyn lay in the bed for another long, quiet minute, with the light of the morning coming through the window onto the foot of the quilt, and she watched the dust move in the light, and she listened to the car start in the driveway and pull out and go. Then she got up. She made herself a cup of coffee. She went downstairs, in her robe, to the small bright room at the back of the house that was hers, where the new watercolor set lived now, and where there was a half-finished painting of a lake she had never been to, drying on an easel by the window. She picked up the brush. She painted, badly, a small, uneven sky, and she did not stop until the sky was finished, And when she stepped back and looked at it, she laughed out loud because it really was a terrible painting. But it was hers, and the house was quiet. And the man who loved her was coming home at 6. And somewhere very far away from this small, bright room in a hospital that had once been a mansion, a woman she would never meet was checking into a bed in a wing that had been paid for, in part, with money that had once been used to put a Polaroid of a sleeping woman into a desk drawer in a building in Chicago. And that woman in the hospital bed did not know any of it, and never would. And Evelyn understood, in the long, slow way she had come to understand most things in the last 20 years, that this was the only ending that meant anything. Not the wedding, not the verdict, not the empire dismantled, or the cousin in the cell, or the half-brother in the unmarked grave. Just this. A woman in a small, bright room with a brush in her hand, and the quiet, and the knowing that she had walked out of a stairwell on the 31st floor of a building in a city that had tried to take her apart, and she had not been taken apart, and she had not been alone, and she was not, anymore, afraid. She dipped the brush. She kept painting. Outside, the sun came up over the trees, and the morning began, slow and ordinary, the way mornings only become slow and ordinary for people who have, at least once in their lives, watched the sun come up through a boarded window after a night they were not supposed to survive. And Evelyn Moretti, who had once been Evelyn Vale, who had once been a paralegal in a corner cubicle, who had once been a small, frightened animal in a stairwell, kept painting, badly, on a quiet Tuesday morning the rest of her life.